Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus on Conservation Online Conference 2025, Routes to Resilience. Continuing the Focus on Conservation conference series, this online event will explore how cultural heritage professionals and institutions can build resilience while facing increasing challenges in safeguarding their collections. This year's convening will center on strategies and approaches that support the long-term sustainability of collections and conservation practices, as well as supporting resilience of institutions and staff. My name is Dawn Rogala, and I'm a program manager and team lead at the Smithsonian Institution's Museum Conservation Institute, and a planning member and a member of the planning committee for this conference. I will be your moderator for the first day of the conference's 4-day program. This event is a collaborative effort of the many groups whose logos you see listed behind me, including members of the Leibniz Research Network Preservation, the International Council of Museums Committee for Conservation, the Smithsonian Institution, Key Culture, the Museum for Naturkunde Berlin, Deutsches Museum, and Deutsches Bergbau-Museum. Some of the committee you will see on camera as moderators this week, while others are working hard behind the scenes. Our thanks go out to all the committee members and their colleagues for creating what we all hope will be an engaging and informative event. Please note that all talks in this conference will be recorded for online publication. Your registration for this event will give you access to the recordings, and you will receive an email when the recordings are available. We would also like to thank our colleagues at Prins Media for partnering with us to run this conference on Zoom and other associated online applications. If you have technical questions, you can write to Prins Media directly in the Zoom chat. Closed captioning is available, and I believe that information will be posted in the chat and possibly in a slide that's rotating online. This is a reminder to all speakers and all audience members to please keep their video and camera off unless you are speaking for the speakers, and for audience members, keep your video and camera off the entire time. We want to create as much of an in-person conference experience as we can in this digital forum. Our goal is to provide as many spaces for conversation as possible, but since mingling and chatting isn't as easy as it would be in a conference center, we have tried to reproduce the experience digitally, from breakout rooms at the end of each day where you can chat directly with speakers, to interactive tools we will be using throughout the conference. Slido is the platform we are using for content-related questions. This is where you should put your questions for the speakers. Please do not put your questions for speakers in the Zoom chat. Please use the Zoom chat for technical questions or announcements to all. Please only use Slido for questions to the speakers. Since there may be more than one speaker in an ongoing session, please put an @ symbol plus the speaker's name at the beginning of your question. This will help the team that is moderating Slido to see and organize your questions for the moderator. The Slido link will be visible on your screen throughout the day and will also be dropped into the Zoom chat for everyone to access. To access Slido, please use the website www.sli.do and type in the event code #FOC2025. You can also use Slido from your smartphone or your computer using the QR code that I think will pop up on the screen if it is not there right now. There are 2 choices in Slido. One tab is for Q&A. Please pose your questions to speakers there, and that Q&A will open up when speakers begin speaking. You can also vote with a thumbs up for questions that others have posted and that you're interested in, or to highlight the importance of already asked questions. Moderators will then pass the questions along to the speaker during the Q&A sessions of the day. There is a second tab on Slido for poll questions. Throughout the conference, we will be asking the audience different questions to help us learn more about you and your work, your interest in the conference topic, and your suggestions for future topics. So let's try that polling function now, if we can. Please go to Slido. Can we put the Slido slide up there so people can see? Great, you can use that QR code. The link is there. So the first question that should pop up on Slido is, from which country are you joining us today? We have been so pleased to see the great number of countries represented in the registrations for this conference, and it would be wonderful to see how many of those countries are joining us on the first day of the event. So we're going to give everybody just a minute. I love the word bubble, the word cloud. This is fantastic. Look at that. Let's give that just a minute. And again, please use the please use the Slido app to input your countries there. Please do not use the chat. The chat is just for technical questions. This is terrific. You'll also notice, again, there's some technical information in the chat. There is a link in the chat to Slido, so please use that for answering the Q&A, for answering these Slido questions. If you scroll up in the chat, you will see that there is a link directly to Slido where you can answer this polling question. Please do not put your answers in the chat. And I realize that some people may not have access to Slido. I do see Egypt and Uruguay and Venezuela, Bangladesh, Brazil, South Africa, Greece, Belgium, US, or Egypt. This is wonderful. Thank you all so much. And this is, again, a reminder for those of us who are just joining us to please turn off your microphone and your camera. Thank you. And again, a reminder that today's talks will be recorded and that your registration for this event will provide you access to those recordings. Oh, a couple of, I love the last ones that pop up. This is really wonderful. And it's a great way for us to sort of get to recognize how international this conference is and to get to learn Slido. All right. That's terrific. Okay, let's go back and get started. I want to thank you all again for being here. As we begin our presentations for the day, again, I want to remind speakers to turn off their cameras and microphones unless they're presenting. In order to stick to time, I will not be reading speaker biographies, but all speaker biographies and presentation abstracts are available on the conference website hosted by ICOM-CC, and I will put those links in the chat as soon as our first speaker begins. Just want to give. All right. Is our first speaker back in the room?
She's there.
She is? Okay, fantastic. Well, let's do that then. Let's open this first day of the conference with our keynote speaker, Kathleen Ferrier, an educator, public speaker, connector, and change maker. Ferrier serves as the chairperson for the Netherlands Commission for UNESCO. The theme of her keynote presentation is Resilience Through Solidarity, 80 Years of UNESCO and Collaborative Futures. Kathleen, if you would please turn on your camera and microphone. And I will give you a 2-minute. That's terrific. I can hear you. I will give you a 2-minute warning when you have 2 minutes left in your time.
Okay.
And go ahead and put your slides up.
Can you also see me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So do you have slides? Do you want to put your slides up?
I have pictures that fit certain parts of my speech. So then I will go to the presentation and then go back. That's at least what I will try to do.
Okay, sounds good to me. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, partners, and friends from around the globe, it is a genuine pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Netherlands Commission for UNESCO. And even though that we meet virtually today, the sense of community is here. Today, I feel that we are united by our shared mission to protect, preserve, and promote heritage in all its forms. And what a significant moment this is. 2025 marks UNESCO's 80th anniversary, 8 decades of fostering peace, knowledge, and solidarity. 8 decades of proving that resilience, the ability to thrive amidst challenges, is built not in isolation, but in collaboration. And I will now try to share with you a picture. Oh. Yeah. Can you see this picture?
Nope, I do not see it.
Do you see a picture now? Since war?
Nope.
No. Oh.
No, I do not see a picture.
Sorry. Yeah. Now you see me again?
Yep, still seeing you.
No. Ja, maar dan krijg ik dit. Desktop 1, volledig scherm. I'm afraid it's not working. Do you have the slides also?
Jenny, can you check in the slide folder to see whether or not Kathleen's slides were updated? Oh, there we go. Okay, so can you see that, Kathleen? Your slides are up?
Let me see, I'll go back to Zoom. Yes, thank you. So can you
Just
move
say
to
next when you want to say.
Yeah, next, yeah. So here you see the foundation of UNESCO. It was founded 80 years ago because we were convinced, the people there were convinced that to maintain peace, you do not only need treaties, but you need to connect people. So the theme of this conference, I will come back to this slide later. The theme of this conference, Roots to Resilience, speaks directly to the essence of our work. Heritage, in all its tangible and intangible forms, is not only a record of the past, it is a source of connection, identity, and community. It reminds us that resilience is rooted in shared values, collective effort, and mutual care. Today, I will reflect on 80 years of UNESCO, explore contemporary challenges in heritage conservation, particularly around funding and emerging technologies such as AI, and share a vision for how solidarity can guide museums and cultural institutions into a resilient future. This is particularly relevant for ICOM and its members, as museums are at the forefront of implementing these strategies, navigating financial pressures, adopting technological innovations responsibly, and fostering international collaboration to preserve and share cultural heritage with diverse audiences. So now we go back 80 years ago. When UNESCO was founded in 1945, the world had just emerged from the devastation of World War II. Cities lay in ruins, communities were fractured, and trust between the peoples and the nations had been deeply eroded. Against this backdrop, UNESCO's mission was both bold and simple: to build peace in the minds of people. And here you see the meeting where UNESCO was founded. This mission recognized that peace cannot be imposed by treaties alone. It requires understanding, connection, dialogue, and shared experiences and learning. Over the past 8 decades, UNESCO has facilitated extraordinary achievements through international cooperation and solidarity. And I want to share with you some World Heritage sites. And can you please put forward the next slide? Here you see the IJsselga Planetarium. That is the oldest still working planetarium in the world, located in Franeker, a northern city here in the Netherlands. It was built by a Frisian wool comber between 1771 and 1781. It features a realistic and accurate model of the whole solar system in IJsselga's former very small home that is still functional today. This IJsselga's planetarium, and can you show the next slide please, is functioning as both a historical monument and an educational center for astronomy. Another interesting World Heritage site is the Waddenzee. Can you show the next slide, please? The Waddenzee. The Waddenzee is the world's largest unbroken system of intertidal sand and mud flats, located along the coasts of 3 countries, the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark in the North Sea. Recognized for its ecological significance, it is a dynamic landscape shaped by tides that create unique habitats for seals, migratory birds, and numerous other species. So we see that these World Heritage sites have been safeguarded, ensuring they remain living symbols of human creativity and cultural identity. Also, with regard to intangible cultural heritage, traditions, oral histories, and communal rituals, such as traditional medicine. Can you please show the next picture, where we see an example of Chinese traditional medicine that is more and more recognized as being very valuable. So traditional medicine and biodiversity conservation methods have been recognized as vital threads connecting generations. And can you please share the next slide also? Here we see an example of indigenous peoples and local communities who play an important role in the governance, conservation, and maintaining the world's biodiversity and nature. And then also we have numerous global education initiatives seen rising during the last 80 years. Programs promoting literacy, science education, and intercultural dialogue have empowered communities, offering tools to navigate social and economic challenges. So, dear friends, consider the ways in which multilateral collaboration has shaped the preservation of heritage worldwide. Heritage is often perceived as a domain of soft power, an instrument for diplomacy, education, cultural exchange. But in reality, this soft power functions as a hard power, as it shapes identities, influences societies, and stabilizes regions in times of crisis. When nations come together through multilateral frameworks, whether via UNESCO or ICOM, they not only safeguard physical sites and collections, but also reinforce social cohesion, mutual trust, and geopolitical stability. This is increasingly evident as voices from the global south take, with reason, a more central role in defining and protecting heritage. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America are not only custodians of rich cultural landscapes, they are also shaping the global narrative about what counts as heritage, how it should be preserved, and how it can drive social and economic development. This shift challenges traditional hierarchies in the heritage sector and demonstrates that cultural engagement can be a strategic lever in global affairs. And here I want to share with you the example of the Mauritshuis, a very important museum here in the Netherlands. It is nicknamed also the Sugar House. It is called after Johann Maurits and was built with the gains he had with the gains from Dutch Brazil, where he, Johann Maurits, was Governor General from 1630 till 1644. Can you show the next slide, please? Here you see the Mauritshuis. It is, you all know the girl with the pearl from Vermeer, which is to advise how you, oh yeah, I see questions here. Yeah, so you see the girl with the pearl. It is one of the iconic paintings in the Mauritshuis, and you see the Mauritshuis is locating next to the Houses of Parliament here in the Netherlands. Can you show the next slide, please? So the director of this museum, Martine Gosselink, has shown a unique kind of leadership when she invited Dayara Tucano, you see her here, a Brazilian indigenous artist from the Tucano people, to create a mural at the entrance of the museum that is inspired by the history and the collection of the museum and the indigenous heritage where Dayara Tucano is coming from. Another nice example, so through multilateral collaboration, heritage becomes more than preservation. It becomes a force of resilience, of dialogue and influence. Museums, cultural institutions, and communities working together under these frameworks can protect identity, foster understanding, and even contribute to conflict prevention. In this sense, culture is both a bridge and a form of strategic agency, proving that what is often labeled soft power can in fact exert profound, tangible influence on societies worldwide. And can you please show the next slide? So here you see a slide of Paperpot in Suriname. Paperpot is a former coffee and cacao plantation in Suriname, and it has been turned into a nature park, and also the original structures, the colonial structures, the plantation structures have been renovated and preserved, which enables visitors to experience the plantation environment. And here you see here the building where the owner of the plantation used to live with his many slaves. But here we see that the original shape has been adapted so that also future generations can imagine how the past was at this plantation. And this is what makes heritage so valuable, not just to preserve it, but to use it so that people can experience what it was and what the meaning is today. This makes heritage so valuable. So now I will move on to our first theme, which is financing and resilience in museums. Because, as you might understand, as we celebrate these successes, we must also face a stark reality. Financial pressures on museums and cultural institutions are growing worldwide. Across the world, public funding for arts and heritage has declined over the past decade due to austerity measures, shifting political priorities, and competing societal needs. Museums face the challenge of maintaining their operations, safeguarding collections, and delivering public programs in this constrained environment. But even this is not merely a story of scarcity. We live in a world of unprecedented wealth, and this presents remarkable opportunities. Over the coming decades, we are witnessing what is often called the greatest wealth transfer in history. Trillions of dollars moving between generations and increasingly into the hands of women who are statistically more inclined to make social and impact investments. This shift has profound implications for the arts and the heritage sector. So now I will show a next slide, please, the next slide, which is an example of private philanthropy. This is a statue. It's called Moments Contained. It is a bronze statue made by Thomas G. Price, and it is placed outside Rotterdam Central Station here in the Netherlands. This statue represents an ordinary young woman challenging traditional public monuments. It symbolizes its symbolism. The symbolism of this statue centers on inner tensions, resilience, and vulnerability, as seen in her confident posture, contrasted by the knuckles of her clenched fists that you can see in her pockets. The statue was unveiled in June 2023, and it has already reached one of its goals, and that is to spark conversations. So we see that private philanthropy, corporate partnerships, and social impact investment can play a central role in sustaining museums, supporting artists, and nurturing grassroots initiatives. Because this statue was placed by the organization Droom en Daad, which is a private philanthropy. But there is more. We see the power of crowdfunding platforms that are enabling local museums and small projects to reach global audiences and donors. We see collaborations with commercial and philanthropic entities that are creating sustainable funding streams for innovative exhibitions and programs. And we see socially responsible investment, that it is increasingly directed towards projects that champion diversity, inclusion, and social justice, amplifying voices that have historically been marginalized. However, we must ensure that this wealth is strategically channeled, reaching not only large established institutions, but also the smaller, innovative initiatives. Consider diasporic creative movement, who blend cultural heritage with contemporary practice. These initiatives redefine culture for the 21st century, but often lack access to traditional funding. Solidarity in funding means supporting these transformative projects, not just established institutions. Trust is central to this process. We have seen donors, institutions, and communities must collaborate on the basis of mutual respect and shared goals. When trust is cultivated, funding becomes more than a transaction. It becomes a partnership, strengthening the resilience of museums and cultural institutions alike. Now I will move to the second theme, AI and the future of heritage conservation. Alongside the financial pressures, we are witnessing a technological revolution. Artificial intelligence. AI offers enormous opportunities for museums and heritage professionals. When it comes to digitization and cataloging at scale, making collections accessible worldwide while preserving fragile originals. The predictive conservation, identifying objects at risk of deterioration before the damage can even occur. And also it enables enhanced accessibility for education, from AI-driven multilingual guides to interactive digital exhibitions. But yet also here, we must navigate these opportunities with care. UNESCO emphasizes the importance of ethics, transparency, and inclusivity in artificial intelligence. Because bias, unequal access, and data security are real concerns. Moreover, AI should augment human experience and not replace it. International cooperations, you will agree with me, is essential. By creating standards, sharing best practices, and embedding our values into AI systems, museums can harness technology to strengthen collaboration, engage audiences globally, and ensure heritage conservation is both effective and equitable. And now let's have a look at the future, looking forward. These routes to resilience. As we look to the next decade, one truth is clear. No museum, no nation, and no community can face global challenges alone. Climate change, digital disruption, social inequality, and conflict all demand collective action. Solidarity and international collaboration are not optional. These are essential. UNESCO's role as a platform for dialogue, innovation, and knowledge sharing is more crucial than ever. By working together, we can integrate heritage preservation with climate resilience strategies. We can also ensure equitable access to AI and digital technologies. We can develop innovative financing models that support both large institutions and grassroots initiatives. So, my dear friends, imagine a world where museums are fully supported financially, digitally empowered, and globally networked. This is not merely aspirational, it is achievable today through collaboration, innovation, and shared responsibility. So to conclude, 80 years of UNESCO remind us that progress is possible when we act collectively. Heritage is not only a record of the past, it is a beacon for the future. Museums are not passive repositories. They are active agents of resilience, education, and social cohesion. To the organizers of this great gathering and the partners and participants of Focus on Conservation 2025, thank you. Let us seize the moment to reflect, to innovate, and to collaborate, to build trust. Let us chart new routes to resilience together, grounded in solidarity, ethical innovation, and shared cultural stewardship. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was wonderful. Oh, you see all of the applause coming up from the audience on the screen.
Coming up, yeah.
Yes, we have a ton of questions coming into the chat. So we have 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just start going through some of these. Can you talk about, since you talk so much about partnerships, can you talk about what resources UNESCO has to help communities build those partnerships? To help, people who may not, who may lack the connections or the outreach. Can you talk a little bit about practically what UNESCO can do for them?
Yeah, so for UNESCO globally, as you all know, our headquarters are based in Paris. So this is of huge importance to them. Like I was talking also about the diasporic cultural expressions, things like that. But, I'm the chair of the Dutch UNESCO Commission, and we have contact with our colleagues in other countries. And we see that often it is not easy to get also nationally, locally, to make this happen. And we, as the Netherlands, the Dutch UNESCO Commission, has taken an initiative to give a platform to what we call the culture, the diasporic cultural expressions that are often not seen and heard, neither heard by the financing institutions. And I think that with that, as we have noticed from our colleagues from other countries, we have set a nice example. We brought out a report called Onvervangbaar, something that cannot be replaced, the innovative power of the culture, and that has had a great impact. It was even adopted by into the policies of local governments, and the importance of this platform is still growing. So it is a unique example and a valuable example of how nationally you can do this. So we have also given a presentation in Paris, because even though there is funding from UNESCO for these kinds of process, and you see that the summary of the report I'm talking about is by our senior advisor, Lisanne Bedoel, put in the chat. So we have set an example that is taken over by Paris and by other countries. And what I would like to say, we all know that the multilateral institutions, sometimes they are a bit slow. So what we have seen is take an initiative nationally, and once you have done this and other countries are taking over the example, then you can also have an impact on the whole multilateral system. So basically answering this question, often there are funds, there is willingness to do things, but sometimes you just need to try to do something to make it practical, visible, what you want to achieve, and then it can be adopted more globally.
Thank you.
Is that an answer to your question, Dawn?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I want to keep going because we have, oh my gosh, we have so many questions. How can the principles of conservation for natural heritage be used within the conservation of cultural heritage? Is there sort of a parallel that you see and things that people have done to get support behind conservation of natural heritage that can be used?
Yeah. You know, I came forward with this example of paper pot, which I visited in Suriname. I was in Suriname last week, and I was struck by exactly what this question is about, because what you see here is an old plantation with also a story, a cultural story of suffering, of people being enslaved, of hard lives, of great inequality within a beautiful nature park, the old plantation of coffee and cacao. And what I've seen there is how people have used the buildings, the plantation, how it functions with its old machinery, etc., to restore them, to innovate it, and to give it the place within the nature park. So here you connect this old plantation, the buildings, the machinery, as part of nature. And to say that you can interchange these experience with cultural heritage and nature heritage, I'm not sure, but what I see is that in the combination of the two, at least at what I have seen, is very interesting. Also, because in these both fields, what we see more and more is that the traditional knowledge of the people who still live there, who have always been living there, and who still have this traditional knowledge on how to deal with nature, to preserve biodiversity, etc., etc., that by doing this, you also give this a platform. And that is also very interesting to see. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question, Dawn.
No, I think you have, and it's great because, of course, I'm just going to pepper you with questions that you're completely not that you hadn't thought about in advance. So I really appreciate it. I I have an interesting question here that's coming up on the list. So the involvement of UNESCO in thinking forward to AI and thinking forward to the use of AI in cultural heritage preservation, is the environmental impact of AI part of that consideration at UNESCO? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the environmental impact, you mean the impact on nature also? Is that what you mean by
Yes, and the energy usage involved with AI and learning and machine learning and yeah.
Absolutely. It is a topic that for UNESCO is a priority. And even though the focus so far has been on the ethical part of it, the ethical use of AI, it also includes, taking this ethical part that is a broad way of looking at AI. So that also includes what you are saying, the environmental aspects of AI. To give you an example, well, so at the UNESCO headquarters, there has been a commission that has come forward with rules and regulations to use AI responsibly. And here in the Netherlands, the Dutch UNESCO Commission, here in the Netherlands, we have around 80 UNESCO schools. We felt the necessity to make a translation of this ethical rules and regulations to adopt it for school leadership. So to give teachers and school leaders tools on how to guide students and young people in navigating all the challenges that AI is posing, especially to them, when it comes to fake news, when it comes to avatars, people who are not real people, all these things. But here, there is a huge challenge because the developments are very fast and it is difficult for us to catch up with it. But I think that UNESCO has really done a great job in very timely bringing forward this commission that focused on the ethical use of AI.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I want to thank everyone for all of their questions. We still had a lot we didn't get to, so I want to remind everyone that if we didn't get to your question during this Q&A, many of today's speakers will be available at the Meet the Speaker breakout rooms at the end of the day. So you'll have an opportunity there to speak directly with today's presenters. Thank you again, Kathleen. Thank you for opening this conference with your wonderful talk.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to open this wonderful conference. And I wish all the participants around the globe a very inspirational time as we need to work together. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Thank you. Thank you again. Okay, we're going to move on to our next presenter. Peter Rasmussen is Director of Conservation at the SMK, the National Gallery of Denmark in Copenhagen. And I want to remind you that full speaker biographies and presentation abstracts are available on the conference website. I'll pop those things in the chat again. The topic of this presentation is Towards a New Paradigm, Sustainable Climate Control. And again, please use Slido for your speaker questions. And the floor is yours, Peter.
Thank you. Let me just share my presentation first of all. Do you see my screen okay?
It's getting there. I see the screen and all the slides down the side, so
This should be better.
there we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
You're on.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to start by addressing where I'm speaking from. So, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Conservation at the SMK, National Gallery of Denmark. And as such, I'm speaking from a tradition of collection management and kind of museum making in a Western European context. And I think it's worth addressing in an international community like ours and a conference like this. So when I've named or called my presentation Towards a New Paradigm, what I mean is that I think we are all starting to realize that working more sustainably and working more towards resilience in a more kind of groundbreaking way than we have been before is relatively new to this part of the world, at least. And I've named the presentation, the subtitle is Sustainable Climate Control question mark. Because on the one hand, I think we all are thinking about the energy use that goes into climate control for collections. And is it really sustainable to keep kind of spending energy on this when we then also add to climate change, which then again feeds back into renewed need for climate control? This is kind of a vicious circle, I think. And on the other hand, I do believe, also in light of the previous talk or keynote speaker, that it is actually quite sustainable to keep collections for the current and future generations, and to keep this international culture alive. So this is a delicate balance that I think we are all trying to navigate. And my presentation will focus mainly on the work on indoor climate for collections that we've been doing at SMK. First up, I'd like to just address the fact as well that we are very used to working with standards for collections, for museum buildings, and a lot of measurements of indoor climate and many other things. And I think standards are hugely useful for decision making. You can't really get into each and every object in the collection. You have to have standards to go by. Measurements are very useful for decision making, for knowing what you're building on. But I do also think that we sometimes tend to forget why we're measuring. Is it really necessary at all times? What we are measuring? Are we measuring the indoor climate next to the object in the room or in the display case? Or are we measuring in a ventilation duct, which is typically an average of several rooms? Are we even talking about the same things when we talk about measuring? And who are the standards for? Are they for the objects? Are they for the conservators or registrars and decision makers? Are they for the Western European museums in the kind of climate we're located in? I don't have the answers to all of these questions, but I do think it's worth zooming out in light of kind of this topic of resilience and thinking about how we spend our resources and if they're always spent best with this kind of work. A quick presentation of the museum. So as mentioned, with the National Gallery of Denmark, we're located in the capital of Copenhagen. What you see in the picture here is the museum building from the end of the 19th century. It was purpose-built for housing the collection and making it publicly available to the Danish population at that time mainly. The collections were originally the private collections of the royal family, and with the abolition of absolute monarchy in Denmark in the middle of the 19th century, the collections were given to the people, and this museum was built to house it. We're in a north temperate zone with a mean temperature of 7.7 degrees Celsius. The collection spans more than 200,000 works of art from 7 centuries. So anything from medieval pieces of art and up until now and contemporary art. I've just mentioned storage here because only 1% of the collection is actually on display in our exhibition spaces. The rest of it is in storage, internally or externally. The staff is around 120 and we have around 600,000 visitors a year. This is a view of the museum building from the other side. As you could see in the previous slide, there is also an additional wing that was added to the building some rough 100 years after the first building. And what you can see here is actually a view from the park. We are located on the old ramparts of Copenhagen. So right next to this white building from the 90s is a lake. So we're very close to water. You can also see that the two buildings are connected by this glass-covered so-called sculpture street. And I've also included a view from above. I just want to see if I can point to what you see here is the original building, which is quite classic kind of museum building from this time in Europe. This is used to be a light well or a sort of a courtyard, internal courtyard, these two areas. And they've been covered up around 1970 to make more room for display. Additionally, this is the new building. You can see the lake here at the top, and connecting the two buildings is this glass-covered street, which is essentially a greenhouse. I'm mentioning this because in a minute I'm going to go into some climate control readings that we have from experiments, and you will see that actually our main problem is keeping the temperature down. The building is not very well able to be cooled down because of all of this joint building mass that we've added over the years. Just briefly going over the sustainability efforts at SMK, we have followed the BSO guidelines and the ICOM-CC and IIC recommendations from 2014 for around 10 years now, widening the environmental parameters for our own collection. We are also urging lenders to us to accept the same. And I could mention that actually this year, right now, as we speak, is the first exhibition that we have with external loans coming in, where we were able to actually get all lenders to accept these wider environmental parameters. So it's taken us 10 years from when we started this work with our own collection to actually being able to do a special exhibition with the same parameters. We also keep parts of the collection in external low energy storage, dubbed the Danish model, using passive methods to climate control around collections. We participated in the Getting Climate Control Under Control program, which I will get back to in some of the next slides. We have experimented with nightly shutdowns of our climate control systems in selected areas of the museum. We want to make this a recurring thing, but we're still in a kind of experimental mode. And we're also underway with a revision of our transport requirements when it comes to packing materials, to climate control along the transport. So the widened environmental parameters, you probably know of these already, but I just want to mention them. We go by 40 to 60% relative humidity and 16 to 25 degrees Celsius for our own collection, as mentioned, with a variation of a maximum of 10% within 24 hours. The seasonal fluctuation should be following kind of outside weather conditions. So the idea is to get like a soft curve over the year, and our focus is mainly on avoiding daily rapid fluctuations. All of this is reflected in our outgoing loan requirements, which can also be found on our website if anyone's interested in looking more into them. And as mentioned, I think our special exhibitions, which are in separate rooms from the rest of the collection, we can keep to 50% relative humidity ±2 in those rooms and 21 degrees Celsius as well. So we are able to live up to this more sort of classic museum parameter, but we prefer not to. Our registrar's office has been doing a lot of kind of diplomatic work for incoming loans over the years. The Getting Climate Control Under Control program that I mentioned before, we took part in this program because the Danish Association of Museums, part of their secretariat is the Green Museum Academy, who work to help museums to work more sustainably. And they have been working with Key Futures, the International Coaching and Training Network for Sustainability, to try to help museums overcome the barriers for making a change towards more sustainable climate control parameters. There were 10 Danish museums participating in an 18-month project. And I believe that this is also going on in other parts of the world at the moment. Our project is finished now, but we're working still internally in SMK with all the learnings from that. We did have some barriers to how we could work along the way because we had an arbitration case surrounding a refurbishment of our HVAC units. But what we could do, so we couldn't touch the system controls and the programs for that, but we could do shutdowns of the units. We did that in 2 areas. One was 6 connected exhibition rooms, and one was a storage room. So the 6 rooms were serviced by one HVAC unit and the 1 storage room by another. We did a grid of data loggers throughout these areas to try to monitor what happened in the rooms when we shut down, because the HVAC units would not be able to pick up on any changes because the sensors would not be correct. So we did a grid, so there were data loggers in all the rooms across, and also in 3 heights to kind of gauge the distribution of air because the hot air rises up. We did measurements and experiments in 4 seasons, so in the warm and humid summer, in the cold and dry winter, and anything in between in spring and fall. So this slide shows one experimental shutdown in 1 exhibition room. What you see here is the temperature on the y-axis and the time on the x-axis. As I mentioned before, our main problem is getting the temperature low enough within the museum building. So you see that at this time of year, which is mid-August, is the warmest time of year in Denmark. So it's kind of peak testing material. You can see that for that blue sort of area, that's the time when we shut off the HVAC unit. So roughly from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning. This is the temperature. So the green line that you see is the outside conditions, and the other 3 lines that are very close to each other, those are the internal measurements in the room. As you can see, they're very close to each other. And you can also see that what happens, although the temperature drops outside, you can see that it's actually quite stable with the HVAC turned off at night. Obviously, we chose the evening because there are no visitors. The doors are closed to this area, which makes it more suitable. But what we see from this experiment is that it's actually quite safe to turn off for 12 hours at night. I also just want to show you the relative humidity measurements that we did. This is the same period of time shown in the same room. Again, the green line is the outside conditions and the other 3 lines are inside. You can see here that the humidity is slightly higher at the top of the room. That's a red line. And again, we're starting very close to kind of the limit of where we want to be. We're around 60% already when we start this experiment. But you can also see that although the outside conditions hit 100% relative humidity overnight, it's actually a very stable curve that rises only ever so slightly within the 12 hours. You can also see, let me just point to this again. You can also see right here, when we turn on the HVAC again afterwards, there's kind of a small hiccup in the line there. Obviously, that's because the HVAC unit registers that the climate is not how it's supposed to be in the ventilation duct, and it starts out by kicking in full speed to try and get in control again. We do believe still that this extra energy use for starting up is so small compared to the period of time that we have shut down that it's still feasible to do this. So our results show that in the old part of the building where this took place, the building can actually buffer very well the outside conditions overnight. I want to also emphasize some of the barriers that we've met in working with this. The first one I want to mention is the lack of resources, obviously funding for purchasing data loggers, equipment, whatever, but also a resource in terms of staff. Working with this requires time to look at all the results, to consider, to meet, to discuss and agree on how to move forward. A barrier could also be documentation or a lack of documentation of historic climate conditions in the building. Another barrier could be just trying to work against the building, trying to make it do something that it's not suited for instance, in terms of climate control. It could be differences in the approach and focus across specialist fields. This kind of work requires collaboration between conservators, building management staff, facilities management, heritage scientists, engineers. We all come into this collaboration with different notions of what's important and what is kind of presumptions about what's important. And I think it's important to acknowledge these differences for them not to become a barrier for collaborating. Presumptions about lenders and peers would be another barrier, assuming that someone else will say, you can't lend this artwork if you can't live up to these conditions. The conservators will never agree to this, is something that I have met many times, but actually I do agree to this, 40 to 60%. So this is also a barrier for moving forward. Visitor comfort could be another. Visitors prefer to be nice and warm so they can leave their coat in the cloakroom. The collections might need colder conditions, and also in the winter in Denmark it would be more feasible. And I also just want to mention that as the National Gallery in Denmark, we are a state entity. That also means that a lot of our buildings management and facilities management has been outsourced. And this external organization around this management makes it a little bit more difficult to quickly do something or experiment, because you have to have both organizations on board and willing to set aside the time. Finally, I also want to mention habitual thinking as a barrier, both in terms of what's viable and what's acceptable, but also just because museums have started to use their exhibition spaces in a different way. And I just want to illustrate this by my next slide. This on the left is a picture from the sculpture street that I mentioned. So the old building is on the left and the new building is on the right. We do events, we rent out the space, people are allowed to eat and drink beverages in this area. To the right, you see a picture also from an event that we had with art talks in the collection spaces. So this is also in the new building. This has been a huge success for us. Thousands of people come in within just a few hours to hear different art talks. They don't just come for the beer, which is also there. They also come to hear about the art, which is obviously why we're here and the main purpose of having the collections. So you see that a room jam-packed full of people like this, of course, is a challenge to the HVAC unit. So it's a different way of using the building than maybe just 15 years ago. This also requires us
1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. I will quickly go over my next two slides, which are the final ones. This all requires risk management and decision making. And by risk assessment, I mean you have to go in a very strategic way about thinking about what the dangers are to your collection. It might not be the indoor climate that's the biggest danger. The decision making in the face of professional uncertainty. You tend to follow patterns of known safety in the shape of standards, but maybe it's actually not the most efficient use of the limited resources we do have. So being resilient is also using the resources best. And finally, I want to mention being mindful of substitute attribution, meaning replacing a complex question with an easier to answer one. So are we measuring the climate because it's easier to consider than actually knowing what will happen to the object, which we won't know maybe until 50 years from now. And just a quick shout out to Dr. Robert Waller and Professor Jane Henderson for all their good work in this field about decision making, which I find hugely inspirational. My final slide is just a recap of what I've been talking about. Future perspectives might include working towards sustainability as a parameter in decision making on conservation. So it's not very sustainable to keep spending a lot of energy considering the collections when actually we're contributing to climate change. It also requires working towards a holistic risk assessment approach to collection management, a common language for what we're measuring and why, and finally, accepting our limitations and working with the building and the collection that we do have, instead of trying to pretend we can do a lot of things that they're not really feasible for. With that, I want to thank you for organizing this conference. I really look forward to the next couple of days and all of the inspirational talks we're going to see. I've put in my contact information at the end in case there are any questions. I'm available for Q&A later as well. But in case you're not up for that, this is my contact information and it's also available on our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. I just want to remind everyone who's putting questions into Slido that we'll be gathering all the questions for the next 3 speakers and having a combined Q&A session after those talks. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in a few minutes. So continuing with today's theme of resilient collections and spaces, for day 1 of the conference, our next speaker is Heidi Sobel, Senior Manager of Conservation at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, Canada. Her presentation theme is Museum Sustainability in the 21st Century. And again, please put your questions into Slido. And Heidi, I will give you a 2-minute warning when you have 2 minutes left.
Thank you.
Go ahead and share your slides.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. If someone could be so kind as to confirm they can see it.
Right now, we're seeing you on your screen.
Okay, we're getting there.
So it's working there. We're seeing the slide and all the slides down. Perfect. There you go. You're
Wonderful.
Good to go.
Thank you, everyone. The title of my presentation today that I'll share with you is Museum Sustainability in the 21st Century. And my name is Heidi Sobel. I am the Senior Manager of Conservation. My background is in paintings conservation, so I'm coming through a lens of conservation as I approach this topic. The Royal Ontario Museum is a 123-year-old museum situated in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It houses over 18 million artworks, objects, and specimens. And while 18 million sounds like a very big number, the vast majority of those are small insects that we have as specimens. It is a museum that generally splits its focus between arts and culture and natural history. Today's talk will share some of the big ideas we are embarking on when it comes to sustainability, but actually disclosing that our path to realizing those big ideas are rooted in small shifts and random opportunities that we either nurture or capitalize on. In developing the strategic plan for the Royal Ontario Museum, our main objective centered on propelling the museum to the global stage, but, and I quote from our strategic plan, focusing on playing a central role in community and cultural life. Seizing on this plan, the ROM started a shift in focus to perhaps the most immediate path forward, sustainable initiatives through environmental opportunities. Institutional sustainability and accountability came to the foreground, such as the hiring of sustainability officers, the formation of green teams, and the reduction in carbon footprints. An example of that would be waste generation, and I'll get more into this as the talk proceeds. One of the pivotal moments in these initiatives, the hallmark, was the hiring of my colleague, Dr. Soren Brothers. He's pictured here to the left in the hat, and centered there is Alan Schiff, who is the donor that sponsors this position, and our director and CEO, Josh Bassages, on the right-hand side. As the Alan and Helene Schiff Curator of Climate Change, this was endowed in 2021. And so this, I would say, is one of those big ideas. And now as we're almost 5 years into his time here at the museum, we're starting to see how that role has evolved and what little things have happened through his contributions. And the main shift for doing this is for the museum to walk the talk, to put an individual in that role and build a department around that. So for ROM sustainability, I'd mentioned we had a green team formed in 2018, and now we have 29 members across 9 departments, keeping in mind that the ROM Museum, as Canada's largest, we have approximately 500 staff members in our facility. This team was instrumental in waste reduction measures, and the focus was on the front of house, so visitors to the museum and waste diversion strategies, as well as back of house, which also was a big waste generator in terms of diverting things into recycling. One of our major problems, just as a fun fact, is paper towels. We seem to go through an inordinate amount of that. So shifting some of those methods back of house to reduce our waste. It is so successful, the Green Team's activities, that it is now integrated in new employee onboarding. So the Green Team provides a presentation to all on a monthly basis, new employees. And here we see an image of the construction of our green roof, known as the Elizabeth Samuel Garden. But how do we measure progress? Facilities efficiency work, such as LED lights and insulation, are very important. But I wanted to focus on this point because we universally strive for reductions of consumption, in particular power, heating, and cooling. And we all do this in our homes. We're shutting off lights, we're doing laundry during non-peak hours, and perhaps we're suffering a bit with temperatures, maybe a little too cold or a little too warm, so as to trim our costs, but also to contribute to reductions in our carbon footprint. For ROM, however, we are an agency of the government of Ontario, and that Ontario being Canada's largest province. So if you think about Canada, the country, it's a northern climate. We have an array of seasons. When it gets hot, it gets really hot. When it gets cold, it gets very cold. Our population is equivalent to the state of California in the United States, but we're spread out over a giant landmass. So Ontario being the largest province. And here we see the image of our seat of government. And that building, the provincial legislature, is exactly 930 meters away from our museum, which is situated there at the top of the screen. Even though we estimate that the museum, through our efforts, had a reduction in hydro costs, and quick note, hydro power is generated through the capture of water movement. And here's Niagara Falls, very famous landmark, which is about an hour or so away from Toronto. That's where our power source comes from for a lot of the province of Ontario, but also the eastern seaboard of the United States. So we, in our efforts over the past decade, we realized about a 30% reduction in those costs. However, and this is the caveat, due to our inclusion in something that's called the global adjustment. The global adjustment is essentially a tax structure in our province, of which the museum is grouped into, that spreads energy costs throughout the provincial sector. So what does that mean? If we have a large consumer that's part of that consortium, the museum savings, all the things that we're doing, are not reflected in our bills. So as in all of those efforts, we can't even tell in terms of a financial sense what's happening. So any motivation we do as an institution to reduce our carbon footprint cannot be seen in dollars and cents, but rather as a philosophical effort only. So while we may not have financial statements documenting our efforts, we do have other ways to measure progress. Alongside Soren, Sarah Camo was hired to evaluate and generate data to support our efforts. Pictured here is past and anticipated emissions by the museum, partnerships with municipal agencies, so in the city of Toronto, like Transform TO, as well as private corporations such as Hatch Engineering, marked a pivotal shift in the museum, forging new community outreach in terms of sustainability and climate. So you see what's happened. We've moved from, well, let's focus on what reduction measures we can do in terms of facilities, and let's look at partnerships in our environment and our community. So while we cannot champion cost savings as a motivator, we do realize that perhaps we can make change through one key tenets of preservation and conservation, and that is climate control of museum spaces. Ubiquitous with museums and galleries is the notion of climate control. Climate control is the manipulation of HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, HVAC, to tailor temperature, humidity, fresh air, and circulation, so that optimal conditions are created to maintain the stability of our artworks, objects, and specimens. ROM buildings are an amalgam of edifices from 1912 to 1932, 1978, and 2007. Each of these buildings, interconnected, have unique HVAC system demands, largely as a result of building materials, gallery placement, and the age of infrastructure. In 1977, the museum began to get museum climate, quote, under control. This was 1 year before the 1978 publication by Gary Thompson's The Museum Environment. For over 40 years, we have abided by the edict of 50% RH and 21 degrees Celsius, as outlined in those publications. Conservators have variously seen these as recommendations and even the gold standard of museum climate. I even have a t-shirt, 50% RH, 21 degrees Celsius. Thompson, however, set these numbers based on the performance of HVAC systems, not the expectations of museum climate. But here's the reality. For decades, we have been unable to attain that narrow, flat line parameter. More so when we see institutions in other climates that even cannot contemplate those set points, whether it's a tropical art gallery or an Arctic history museum. And those are the relationships we're building as we reach out into the global stage and as we're working with our loans and exhibitions program. Adding to all of this is climate change. Climate change will continue to strain these strict objectives. In response to our changing climate, museums are beginning to rethink our strategies in very practical fashions. The Bezoe Green Protocol, updated in 2023, introduces museums to principles surrounding the reduction of energy consumption, which is well known to affect climate change. Embedded in the protocol is also a change in those set points, as was mentioned in Hale's previous presentation. Wider ranges of set points between 40 and 60% RH and 16 to 25 degrees Celsius. Currently, our conservation department here at ROM is applying those new set points to our boilerplate language for loans and exhibitions, as well as for our own collection. We do, however, put in a caveat. If the object demands a specific climate requirement, such as a corrosion-prone bronze object, we will define it in that agreement. And how do we control museum climate? I like to think of it as two main camps, Camp HVAC and Camp Passive methods. Camp HVAC relies on mechanical heating, cooling, chilling, condensing, and reheating of circulation of air. It does so based on defined set points within the machine, running headlong into system shutdowns, gallery visitors, which we have at least 1 million a year, give or take. And those gallery visitors in our climate are introducing humidity from things like wet parkas to snow-soaked knit hats, which we call toques in Canada, and of course are increasingly demanding climate change. But there is a silver lining. The cheapest way to control climate is by focusing on dehumidification without temperature control. What does this mean? Essentially making storage spaces mainly focused on humidity control, not temperature, which is largely dictated by human comfort. So what we're doing is we're bifurcating our storage spaces. We're not putting our technicians and specialists working in those spaces. Those are specific to storage. And the most critical goal of museum climate must be the reduction in fluctuations, which we remember from the earlier slide of the paint cracks from Mecklenburg. It is the fluctuations that cause a considerable amount of damage, not the high-end or low-end climate settings. At ROM, starting in the 1980s, we began to employ these microclimate generators pictured here. These machines control the humidity, not the temperature, through piped air into specific groupings of cases. And you can see that on the slide to the right. If you look up towards the ductwork, you'll see a tiny white pipe followed by an attached flexible hose. That's all that's piped through the ceilings from these microclimate generators pictured here. So if we have Roman bronze objects, we set them at a very low RH at the microclimate generator, while other cases containing organics can be set higher. So no matter what is going on in those ambient settings, as visitors come in with all those wet toques, the microclimate generator will humidify or dehumidify the incoming air to maintain a stable RH set point inside those cases, until it does not. Here we see an MCG-fed case that is supplemented by conditioned silica gel because of a failure with the machine. So I want to just make a mention of this, that we are very fortunate in our museum to be able to have this legacy of microclimate generators to control our environments in cases and plinths. And I understand that as a privilege, and that is something that we've embarked on, and now we have this legacy to do that. Camp passive methods is where we can get really creative, and by thinking a little bit more about legacy solutions. Bezo's wider set points help us and our loan partners. Physical attributes like door sweeps, airlocks, and climate-driven object placement. And this I know is built on some known facts. Inner galleries have less temperature and RH fluctuations as you move in through the infrastructure. And perhaps the new member to this camp is AI. AI can use data from building automation systems, BAS, and can anticipate hourly demands and head them off at the pass. It folds in exterior weather reports to modulate HVAC systems. It can consume previous year's data and then extrapolate to future tweaks into systems. We're looking at proactive versus reactive. So similar to PIL, our institution engaged as well in the Key Culture Climate Program. We concluded just this past spring an 18-month participation in that pilot study with Key Futures entitled Getting Climate Control Under Control. Key Futures is a global-based museum sustainability organization based in the Netherlands. It is intended to provide the collective museum sector a more inclusive and updated approach to museum client set points, as well as adopting new cost-saving strategies. Our ROM team consisted of an array of ROM champions. We did have 500 staff, so we had a lot of interest in participating. And this resulted in a dynamic group playing active roles in these innovations. The Key program also introduced us to allies throughout the globe. These contacts detailed the necessity for inclusivity in loan arrangements, as well as strategies such as guest sweaters for visitors entering cooler storage rooms, but with more stable RH, most certainly. Our main tangible, as we did some of the tests, much like SMK, we staged those testing periods overnight. We also had HVAC and fan shutdowns in galleries, but also in our designated storage facility. And the result, very similar. We saw no change in object conditions, and we maintained those through condition reporting, as well as no discernible fluctuations in the museum climate, particularly the relative humidity. At issue, though, what we had to screen out was we had, massive issues and swings with our own external outdoor weather, but also we're under construction in certain one of the four museums that are buildings that situate in our museum. So all of that had to be filtered out into context of our shutdowns.
2 minutes, Heidi, 2 minutes.
Okay. So what is ROM's role in museum climate? The Key program raised awareness of what needs to be done, from making museum loans more accessible to smaller and mid-sized institutions that have been historically shut out by narrow climate parameters, to emphasizing that ROM has a leadership role to play. As Canada's largest museum, simply put, we need to be the example of how to respond to climate change. Key taught us the value in cross-departmental participation and the demystification of museum climate, that upgrading our infrastructure will make us nimbler about energy saving and climate harm. We aren't seeking to relax standards, but rather understand, update, and integrate them. So to conclude about, just as a summary to our participation in what the Key program taught us, was exposing the frailties or sensitivities within our facilities and our mechanical capabilities. But what it did teach us was that when those machines failed, when they were upgrading, when they were purchasing a new cooler, that's the opportunity that we can come in as sustainability officers to say, let's make this a greener option. Let's make this more carbon neutral. Let's make this net zero. And that's how we started. And through those tiny tweaks of all of these systems, we can get to those goals. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. And again, I will look forward to any questions that would be presented in the Q&A later on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heidi. That was great. That was a lot. It was terrific. Reminder to everyone that Heidi will be joining us after the next talk for the Q&A for 3 speakers. So continue to put your questions for Heidi into Slido. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our 3rd speaker in this group. The next speaker is Dr. Brian Coyle, the Executive Officer of the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center in Edgewater, Maryland, in the U.S. The topic of Dr. Coyle's talk is Building a Sustainable Campus for Resilience, Research, and Education. And Brian, if you want to go ahead and share your slides.
Sure, I'm going to do that right now.
And I'll let you know when we can see them.
Okay, are you able to see them now?
Nope. There, I think you're one button over from where you wanted to be there. One more to the right. I'm seeing your one slide, but all the slides down the side.
Ah, okay.
And I'm now seeing the top and bottom. I'm seeing your slide, but also the top and bottom of your screen. There you go. Perfect. You're on.
Okay. Check there. Oops. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Hello to everyone. And I want to thank you, Dawn, and all the organizers for inviting me to participate in this wonderful program. I am Brian Coyle, and as Dawn mentioned, I'm the Executive Officer at the Smithsonian's Environmental Research Center, which we refer to as CERC, and I will be referring to it as such throughout the presentation. So at CERC, I oversee administration, operations, campus development, and some research initiatives. And I'm an ecologist by training, and I'm also a member of the Smithsonian's Sustainability Working Group. And in the past, I've participated in a number of sustainability initiatives at the Smithsonian, and I've become particularly interested in renewables and different ways that we might be able to achieve net zero goals for the entire institution. So I'm excited to have this opportunity to share about sustainability and resilience at CERC. And today I'm going to walk you through our plan at CERC to become a net zero campus. So this is a plan that we've had since before my time, really started in about 2009. And we've made significant progress, and we're really on our way to hopefully achieving that goal before the end of this decade. Becoming a net zero campus would mean that we use no fossil fuels. Essentially, we generate no electricity from fossil fuels. We try to use only vehicles that are electric, and in all other sources too, we just use electrical or renewable sources. And I want to give you also a kind of an overview of our holistic approach to sustainability, including nature-based solutions, environmental research and education, and especially the facilities and infrastructure. So the presentation is divided more or less into 4 steps on our pathway to ever-increasing sustainability. And if you never have been to CERC, I'm sure many of you have not, I strongly encourage you to visit if you're in Maryland or in the Washington, D.C. region. It's a beautiful place. It's got a fascinating and inspiring history. And the picture here that you're looking at shows part of the campus, including the river system, the Road River, that leads into the Chesapeake Bay. Chesapeake Bay is one of the largest conservation communities on the planet, and really one of the biggest networks of conservation and restoration focused science and implementation in the world. So it's a wonderful location to be, a really rich science and conservation community. And the entire campus is now about 2,650 acres, which includes approximately 70% forest, 10% marsh, 10% agriculture, and 10% infrastructure. So here you'll see just a picture of where CERC is, just to give you a little better sense of location. We're located about 25 miles from Washington, D.C., and then also about only 15 miles from Annapolis, which is the state capital of Maryland. And so it's a great access point for many people coming in internationally and nationally. We're also open to the public all year round, and there's 10 miles of trail. So we encourage people to come and to see what we do and understand more about our sustainability goals. So in the almost 60 years since CERC was founded as a 368 acre dairy farm that was donated to the Smithsonian, we have grown to almost 10 times that size. And so when it was originally donated as this dairy farm, Smithsonian wasn't sure what to do about it. They thought, well, perhaps we should just sell it and use that money to go back into some of the other programs that we have. But the secretary at the time, Ripley, he thought that we should keep it and see if maybe this would be of interest to researchers that were looking at restoration. So how does a landscape that was used for farming transform into a more natural landscape? And so since that time, CERC has grown in many ways, from just a handful of researchers to a thriving world-class environmental research center, as well as an international convening center. And it's also become a model of sustainability, not only for the Smithsonian, but for the entire federal system and for the Chesapeake region. So when it was first founded, it was called the Chesapeake Bay Center for Field Biology. But the core mission has remained focused on understanding environmental issues, especially the impact that humans are having on the environment, which of course have dramatically intensified since the 1960s. And CERC scientists and their many collaborators have been monitoring anthropogenic impact and restoration efforts, studying the effects of air and water, other sources of pollution and human activity since the 1970s at numerous long-term research sites on our campus in Edgewater. And our education program has trained thousands of young scientists over the decades, including a residential summer intern program that we have. That's one of the longest running environmental internship programs in the nation. And students live on campus in dorms, and they work closely with our scientists throughout the summer to develop projects and carry out those projects. And each year, we also work with hundreds of participatory or citizen scientists and provide outdoor education programs to thousands of local students, as well as professional development to teachers from around the country, all of this to promote environmental literacy and stewardship. And much of this work focuses on nature-based solutions to the climate crisis, including carbon capture by forests and wetlands. And so I share all this just that you understand how much exposure we have and how great of an opportunity it is for us to be able to work with people and share what we're doing. And so there's 4 steps I mentioned on our strategy to achieving a net zero campus. And the first has always been research and awareness. And so we have worked to develop programs, research programs, education programs, as I mentioned, that study the impacts of humans on the environment throughout the Chesapeake and also nationally and internationally. And so one of the most significant programs that we have is our Global Change Research Wetland. And this started in the 1980s. We were looking at changes, we were noticing changes in the environment. And so we wanted to understand what those changes were doing to marshlands, to wetlands. And it's been going on for over 38 years now, funded by the Department of Energy. We have, since it started, developed this program into partnerships with hundreds of different institutions and organizations and researchers and scientists. Many students come here to study this and has produced many publications. Over that time, we have changed and added to many of the questions that we investigate. from do ecosystems remove carbon dioxide faster as carbon dioxide rises? So that was one of the first questions that we wanted to ask. That was one thing that we needed to understand if we are going to be adding more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Are we able to, is our natural resources able to actually absorb that? And we know that that hasn't been the case. And so we've added more questions then. How do plants respond to microbial activity? And then how does that affect carbon sequestration? How will future ecosystems be resilient to sea level rise? So in our marshes, for example, they are an important buffer, as we know, to sea level rise. And in many cases, these are being used as natural barriers that will allow at least some coastal systems to survive a little bit longer, be more resilient. If we can restore coastal ecosystems, then we may be able to provide some buffer to the effects of rising sea level. And so we are looking at that with our marshes to see, how does different plant communities and how do increases in not only the sea level, but also increases in precipitation and in nutrient runoff affect these marshes, and then how can we use what we've learned to make recommendations and to advise policyholders and natural resource managers. One of the other things that we've been doing is looking at how those changes also affect forest systems. So along coastal systems, we're seeing a lot of forests that are starting to be heavily impacted. They also serve as buffers to the effects of climate change. And so we wanted to study, what does it look like in 10 years, in 50 years, and in 100 years, based on climate models? How will that affect not only wetlands, but also coastal forests? And so in the wetlands and the marshes, we are conducting experiments where we do thermal manipulations to simulate what the temperature will be like in 30, 50, and 100 years, and then understand how that might affect the way that marshes are so that we can predict and make strategies for resilience. And in forests, we are doing a 10-year experiment where we flood one treatment with rainwater or what simulated rainwater from wells to look at the impact of increasing precipitation, more intense storms, to understand how that increasing precipitation is going to affect those forests over time. Are they able to absorb that water? Does it have a negative impact on the way that they grow, on forest succession? And then on the other treatment, we use water from the river, which is salt water from the Chesapeake Bay, so it's brackish, and we flood another adjacent forest to look at the effects of sea level rise and how is that going to impact forest growth over time. Another experiment that we have been doing, just one example of the many experiments that are happening at CERC, it is essentially one giant outdoor laboratory. And so as people are walking around, the public are walking around and seeing, the nature and enjoying the green space, they're also able to observe all these different experiments we're doing. And so biodiversity is an experiment, a 100-year experiment that we planted only about 12 years ago to look at the effects of diversity on trees and reforestation, to understand how best to do reforestation. So there are many efforts underway during this decade of restoration to plant trees around the world. So one example in the state of Maryland is a goal to plant 5 million trees by 2030. The Nature Conservancy is also working to plant 1 billion trees. But the way the trees are planted makes a big difference, of course. So planting monocultures versus planting diverse forests is going to make a difference. And many places may not understand exactly what the best way to do this is. And so we are providing the evidence needs for these efforts that are doing reforestation on a large scale to understand how to be most effective. And so what we have looked at, for example, with biodiversity is different treatments of different levels of diversity. So some of the plots that you see here are single species, just monoculture. And others have a diversity of native trees to the eastern forest, from a mix of 4 tree species to a mix of 16 tree species. And what we have observed in just the 12 years since this program has been running is that those forest plots with greater diversity are growing much better. The trees grow larger. There's mixed canopy. It's cooler inside the forested area. We're seeing a much greater amount of biodiversity, both insects, birds, and mammals. The trees are healthier. They're more resilient to pests and to disease. And so, in all ways, essentially, we have seen that planting more diverse forests has much greater benefits for biodiversity, and it's also much more resilient. Whereas some of the monocultures will die off if some sort of disease comes through. They also don't grow as fast or as thick, and they don't provide as much habitat for biodiversity. So this has been a great result, and we're using this information to help the different programs that I mentioned to do forest planting in a way that is going to be most beneficial for carbon capture, for sequestration, as well as for biodiversity. And this is not only for those programs that I mentioned, but also for the timber industry. CERC is also the head of the Coastal Carbon Network, where we are helping nations around the world, especially in the Mesoamerican region, to capture and understand the impact of restoration of coastal forest systems for mangroves and for other blue carbon systems, understand how much carbon they're capturing, and train scientists and students on how to collect that data. And then we help them to use that data in order to meet their commitments to international goals, to national goals. And so CERC is kind of at the center of helping to create a network for international scaling of nature-based solutions. And so step 2 in our goal to becoming a net zero campus is really focused on facilities and a commitment to energy efficiency. And so in 2015, CERC took a major leap forward on sustainability infrastructure with the opening of what was at the time Smithsonian's only LEED Platinum building, the over 90,000 square foot Matthias Laboratory. It's shown here. It's an elegant building. It combines a variety of sustainability elements. So the rooftop and adjacent parking areas you see there are covered in solar panels, and they provide much of the power of the building. There's also a passive solar heated water system, and the walls of the building are highly insulated, so it's very efficient. And in front of the Matthias is now a rich native plant meadow that provides habitat to diverse wildlife. And underneath that are 250 geothermal wells that provide the heating and air conditioning to the building and to adjacent buildings. The windows are designed to be highly visible to birds in order to prevent mortality that often occurs as a result of birds colliding into transparent or reflective glass. It also has rainwater cisterns that capture rainwater for irrigation, that we also divert into retention ponds to create more habitat. And much of the water that's used within the building is recycled in an on-site treatment plant for reuse. And the interior of the building was also thoughtfully designed with abundant natural light and with water and acoustic elements to create a more positive environment to promote psychological well-being. The next step is committing all future buildings to be net zero. So when we updated our master plan, we made the commitment that all future buildings that will be constructed at CERC are all going to be net zero or net positive. And so you'll see here, this is just a schematic of what we call the Green Village, where we have a dorm that is for summer housing for students. We have cottages that are for visiting scientists, and we have a convening center for conferences. This shows the 6 cottages that were recently constructed, opened in 2023. They have solar on top, and not only are these now LEED Platinum, but they're also Pious House certified. So Passive House certified, I'm sorry. Passive House is it's one of the highest levels of sustainable construction. The buildings have a really tight envelope, meaning that there's no air infiltration. They have thick walls for stronger insulation, and they're all powered by photovoltaics. And so these buildings generate up to 500 times the amount of energy that they use, and they are very net positive, therefore. And the energy that is the excess energy is used to power adjacent buildings. And we hope to
2 minutes
continue.
left, Brian. 2 minutes.
Okay. So step 4 is the final step, and that's achieving net zero campus by 2028. And we aim to do that with more rooftop solar. We currently have 10 buildings with rooftop solar. We're going to add more rooftop solar. And then we're also moving to create a 2 megawatt agrivoltaics ground-based research array. And so you'll see here some examples of agrivoltaics array. And so this is an example of dual use landscapes. And so there has been some controversy about placing ground-based solar array on farmland. Farmland is the easiest place to put it because it's already open and you don't have to remove trees and you can put solar on there. But some people have said that it takes productive landscapes out of use and it's a food security issue. So there's now an emerging field of agrivoltaics where we are both using solar on the same site as we are conducting agriculture, performing agriculture. And so CERC is about to construct one of these. That's our plan, to construct a 2 megawatt array, which would take up about 12 acres of land, where we would be performing research on the different types of agriculture that are most amenable to this type of setup, where you have photovoltaics generating energy as well as productive agricultural landscape generating food. And we're also looking now to do cool roofs with rooftop PV. So we want to so CERC is an example, a model of sustainability, and we want it to be a demonstration for how to do best sustainable design. One of those ways is not just conventional solar on the rooftops, but doing that on reflective rooftops so that the panels, which can be bifacial, which means that the sun can activate the PV from the top and the bottom, reflects off the roof to generate more electricity. And also the roof essentially is painted white and insulated. It's light color, so it reflects a lot of the solar off the building, either into the solar arrays or back into the sky. And so the building stays cooler, and so there's less energy that's used. And this final slide is just an example of some of the different setups of agrivoltaics that we may be testing at CERC. There's many different examples. Right now, as I mentioned, it's an emerging field. The technology is evolving quickly. And so there are different ways to set up the solar panels. They can be vertically oriented. They can be horizontally oriented. They can be set up on motors so that they can adjust and track the sun. And all of these have advantages for different types of agriculture, different types of food systems, or grazing with animals like sheep or cows. And so the system that we'll set up will not only generate enough electricity to make us net zero campus, where all of our electricity that is used by all of the research and the buildings is generated from photovoltaics, but also will allow us to do this experiments on agriculture. And it's a benefit to farmers as well, because in the areas where farmland has become so valuable as real estate, many farmers are selling off their land because farm production alone isn't enough. But having this extra source of income will allow them to be financially viable. And so that's a major focus of the research and the dual use benefits of doing this agrivoltaic system. So I think my time is up, and I appreciate the opportunity to present. I look forward to participating in the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. Oh, there's so many questions I have about this. If I can ask all three of our speakers to turn their cameras and their microphones back on. So if Peter and Heidi, if you can join us, and if you can pin the other speaker on there we go. Fantastic. All right. Oh, so many questions here. Let me pull up my page where our team is rapidly putting questions together. All right. We take about 10 minutes for questions. And again, just a reminder to all the attendees, if we don't get to your questions, most of our speakers will be in breakout rooms, meet the speaker at the end of the day. So you'll be able to continue conversations with them then. But let's just jump in. I'm going to go right to Peter. Has adopting these sustainability efforts changed your staff resources? Does it require more or less staff time and attention or more or less specialized knowledge?
Not yet, I would say. I think I mentioned in one of the slides, there was still kind of an experimental mode. So as such, it hasn't changed the resources we set aside for it. I will say it was easier when we were in the program of Key Futures, because then we had kind of deadlines to meet in the different decisions. We had team meetings to attend. So I think now that we're not in that program anymore, it's actually more difficult to drive the process because it happens kind of in between other things. But the idea is to set up systematic shutdowns in our climate control units so that we don't have to set aside as many resources and can focus on recurring kind of evaluation. Yeah.
That's great. Let's see. Thank you. I'm going to go to Heidi. How did you approach the donor who sponsored the curator of climate change? Were there barriers to getting them on board from the museum itself?
Very good question. Because it was such an atypical endowment, right? Because normally we're like, let's just get more curators to deal with the collection. So I think this was just one of those things that happened with their developing our strategic plan to say, and I wrote that in the slide, we're going to walk the talk. If we're going to be doing sustainability measures and employing these types of community events, then that's what we're going to do. So then our fundraising arm of the institution said, this is the type of endowment we're looking for. And sure enough, there was a donor that said, you know what, that's something that I would like to support. And so that's how that started. I wouldn't say that Dr. Brothers is the first climate change curator, but he's one of the earlier ones for sure that has been onboarded in museums.
Thank you. Brian, has there been an export of the principles you developed towards other portions of the Smithsonian, either in how they're running their energy or I don't remember now, does the campus grid actually export some of its energy to other Smithsonian units as well? I know it's sort of two questions on there, but.
So our grid does the energy that we generate, all the clean energy that we generate is used on campus. And we are located in Maryland, so any excess energy that we would generate would go back into the grid for Maryland, and so not necessarily directly to other Smithsonian buildings. However, downtown in the Washington, D.C. area, where most of the Smithsonian buildings are located, that potential exists to be able to generate electricity from Smithsonian buildings and then also use that and distribute that energy to other buildings. So what we've done at CERC, many of the things that we've done for sustainability have been informing what the Office of Facilities Management and Reliance does at other places and OPDC. So, for example, we have electric vehicle charging at CERC. This is the only unit at the Smithsonian that has this, but it's something that we hope to see that is available at other Smithsonian units for staff vehicles. And then also, we've been taking advantage of important financing mechanisms that are available for solar renewables and for other renewable energy that allows us to generate some revenue from the renewables that we have, and then use that money to put it back into buying and installing more sustainable infrastructure. And so that's process that's now starting to happen with other facilities at the Smithsonian as well.
And something that I think is interesting here is when you were talking about sort of dual use landscapes, right? Where you're creating energy, but you're also farming the landscape and things. We all have this educational mission, right? So what we're doing can serve that as well, because I know that CERC does tours and allows people to come in and learn about the energy campus and how that's all set up. And there are opportunities with what everybody's doing, what all this whole group is doing, to take the educational portion of their institution's mission and fold that into what they're doing. I'm going to just jump on. So, Peter, has SMK experienced any resistance from loaning institutions? And if so how do those diplomatic procedures look?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a dialogue each time from a registrar's office directly to the lender. And I mean, I don't know if you would call it resistance as such. I mean, they are not opposed to us doing this for our own collection. So it's mostly about special exhibitions. And I think it only takes one lender. So to require the 50% plus minus two, and then that's what we're going to do for the whole exhibition space. So I think, yeah, I mean, some resistance in the shape of not being sure if the objects can handle the wider parameters. And when you're not sure, you tend to err on the safe side of safety. So I think it's kind of a hesitation, I think. When you're in doubt, do you say yes or do you say no? I think many people would tend to say no because they don't want to be the one making the wrong decision. And it feels safer to say,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, in that sense, I think we encounter some resistance, but I don't mean in an aggressive way. I just mean people are very keen on safeguarding their collection, which is what they're supposed to do.
Right. Thank you. Heidi, how do you gauge the sustainability progress at ROM in the absence of sort of AHU specific data?
Well, we do have some, as I noted, some like emissions projections and things like that. So there's just some peripheral data that we can use to help inform that we're getting stuff done. Like I said, it's more of a spiritual or philosophical pursuit and less of fiduciary kind of, or financial rather exploration. It's really not, it's not tangible in that regard. So that's all we generally have. But I will mention that the key program that we also participated in, like SMK, was very useful for us to have many departments participate that wouldn't normally know what an RH chart would look like. And so what that did was it shifted the internal museum dialogue about how the impacts of climate change and the things we can do to museum environment. And that, I think, was perhaps the most fundamental change that we could capitalize on. So we created our own internal language that more and more people could understand. So it's going to be a very few degrees every year, shifting by degrees. I mean, in terms of the direction we're going to end up in. One other thing that I do is I'm very attenuated to which repair trucks are in the loading bay every morning. And I'm thinking, okay, if this is an HVAC person, I know that they might be working on this floor. Is there an opportunity to discuss they're changing a boiler? Is there a way we can put a heat pump in? So getting into those dialogues just by circumstance or accident.
You're just trolling the loading dock, just sort of seeing who might be there that you can talk to. Nice. I like that. Conservator, like hiding behind the boxes, checking to see who's in the loading dock. I love that. And I'm going to follow up with something for Brian about this idea of what we're all sort of talking about small steps, right? You have big ideas, but small ways to get there and using common sense. And you've talked about it a little bit with some of the EV charging things, but what other elements of CERC's approach do you think could realistically be adapted by museums or smaller institutions? Like what small things could they do? I'm just going to keep rambling. I want to let you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when it comes to infrastructure, new infrastructure, there's many ways that they can, obviously, with building new facilities. They can build them according to some of the sustainability codes for better insulation, energy conservation measures, renewable energy wherever possible using geothermal or rooftop solar. There's many financial incentives too now, especially in the United States. There has been under the previous administration. It'll expire soon, but the Inflation Reduction Act had a lot of incentives. The state of Maryland, other states have a lot of financial incentives to do this. And there's also payment that you can get for generating electricity. And so it makes it feasible. It makes it affordable. It's no greater cost than building a conventional building without any sort of renewable or sustainable elements. And so if you think it through, and you can also reach out in the United States with the National Renewable Energy Laboratories or other DOE, Department of Energy offices, to learn more about better ways to construct new facilities and financial mechanisms to help to support that.
Thank you. And we have so many more of these. We're going to wrap up the Q&A session right now. I want to thank all of our speakers and remind all the attendees that these speakers will be available in the breakout rooms later today, so you can chat directly with them. So thank you to everyone. We're going to take a short break now, so you can get up and stretch your legs, get a beverage, and settle back in for the next group of presentations. The conference will resume precisely at 15:30 UTC. We will actually start about a minute before that, maybe a minute and a half before that, with another Slido poll to kind of get everybody back into it. So if everybody could come back at maybe 15:28, 15:29, something like that. So everyone get up, stretch your legs. Thank you again to all of our speakers for the first portion of today, and we'll see you all in a few minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to the second half of day 1 of Focus on Conservation 2025, Routes to Resilience. So we're going to start this second half of today's presentations with another Slido poll. So please go to Slido. I believe you're going to see the link soon and the QR code in the chat. If you could pull that up. I don't see it on my screen yet. If you could pull up the next Slido question, that would be great. Waiting to see the QR code slide on the screen. Okay, well, the next Slido question should be, what type of organization do you work for? Please keep your answers short, no more than 2 or 3 words. Library, archive, museum, monuments, freelancers. There are so many different areas of work that touch cultural heritage management and preservation, and it would be really great, I think, for us to see the variety of organizations that are represented here today. So again, remember to just use a couple of words. Oops, disappeared off the screen. Okay, well, we'll be gathering that. There we go. Let's just give this 1 more minute to pull these in. Interesting. Interesting, interesting. Huh. All righty. Let's get started. So following up on our earlier presentations on sustainable collections and building environments, our next group of speakers will look more closely at climate guidelines and at the constructions of resilient building envelopes. There's a reminder that the full speaker biographies and presentation abstracts are available on the conference website hosted by ICOM-CC, and also a reminder to attendees to put all your speaker questions into Slido. Our next Q&A session will happen after this next group of speakers. So our first speaker in this session will be Dr. Stefan Bichelmeier, Research Associate at the Fraunhofer Institute for Building Physics in Holzkirchen, Germany. Dr. Bichelmeier will be speaking on the topic of future climate simulation and risk assessment for cultural heritage. And that looks perfect. Stefan, the floor is yours. I will give you a 2-minute warning.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Hello and welcome to the talk, Future Climate Simulation and Risk Assessment for Cultural Heritage. I want to show you today the future simulation, climate simulation on 2 examples. On the example, building Charlottenhof Castle, which is an unheated historic building located in Germany, in Potsdam Sanssouci. And the second one is a depot, a modern built depot. It's located in Austria, next to Vienna, in Himberg. So the first project was a Keres project, or was the Charlottenhof was part of the Keres project, and this was about resilience and protection from extreme climate events. And the Depot Himberg was part of the project Heritage Science Austria, where we investigated pest infestation in future climate scenarios. How do we do that? We use for the simulation a hygrothermal simulation tool. It's called WUFI Plus. And on the picture right, you can see a simplified model, a house. So we built in the software the building envelope, and the envelope will be hygrothermally simulated. That means it's not only a thermal simulation, but also a hygric simulation. We can also implement the HVAC or part of the HVAC with heating, cooling, humidifying, and so on, and also inner sources in case of museum buildings like visitors. What we need is also the outdoor climate with temperature, relative humidity, sun irradiation, wind, and rain. And with this boundary condition, we can simulate the indoor climate. And since we calculate the envelope hygrothermally, we can also take into account moisture buffering effects of the building envelope, but also of the implemented arts objects. So as a result, we get the indoor climate with temperature and relative humidity, and also energy and moisture fluxes. For the simulation of climate change scenarios, we want to investigate the impact on indoor climate. And for the building Charlottenhof, we investigated here the over degree hours, that means overheating in the building, and assessed the indoor climate with the lifetime multiplier. The second building, the depot, we investigated the effects of climate change scenarios on the HVAC systems in terms of energy consumption and humidification. This is the case study Charlottenhof Castle. The building was built in 1826 by the architect Karl Friedrich Schinkel, 200 years ago. And to simulate, we need climate change scenarios, and these climate change scenarios were calculated by GERIX, the German Climate Service Center, and they were part of the Keres project, and they calculated these projections for the local area of Potsdam. And so on the pictures right, you can see some scenarios. These are 80 available scenarios for Germany, Europe, and here is an example. It is shown hot days, and on the graph below, the hot and humid days. And for the building simulation, we need hourly data. That means we simulate in hourly steps, and therefore we need for the outside climate, for the climate projections, hourly data. And out of the 80 available models, climate change scenarios, are only 10 models usable for the building simulation. And so we have used for this investigation these 10 models, and this was the first time for cultural heritage that the climate projection are calculated using 10 different regional climate models within the RCP 8.5. So this is the methodology. The procedure for the building simulation. First of all, we have to inspect the building on site to understand the building in terms of building construction, how the building works, and we have to do some data collection to measure the indoor climate. And after that work, we draw a CAD model and export it to Wofi Plus. So the image in the middle upper image is the Wofi Plus model. It's a simplified model, but it is important to implement the building envelope as good as possible comparable to reality. After that followed a phase of calibration based on the measured data. So we compare the simulated indoor climate with the measured data. And after that, we run the simulation, the ensemble simulation with the RCP 8.5 scenario. After that, we evaluate the model results. Here we can see two graphs. The upper graph is the temperature course inside the measured data, and for the validation, we compare the simulated result, and you can see two lines in the temperature graph in the upper graph, and they are very close together. So that means that the simulation gives us a very good answer, very close to reality. In the graph below, the blue line, there you can see the relative humidity course, a measured one, and the simulated one. And it's quite a good simulation result. So it's a kind of validation. We say also calibration of the model. So we can be sure that the model works quite well. And the table shows some statistics on comparison of measurement and simulation. And these are the first results on temperature. And since we use 10 different climate models, you see in the graphs 10 bars. And each bar stands for one model and for a period of 30 years. And on the left diagram, the historical comparison period is shown, and there is a horizontal line, and this horizontal line is the mean value of the measured data for the year 2020 to 2021. And if you look to the graph in the middle, we can see that the bars are coming up. The temperature is rising a little bit. This is what we already see and what we expect for climate change scenarios. And if you look to the right diagram, we see the far future simulation results, and it's getting even more warm. Yeah, so far so good. This is what we expected, and the simulation with 10 different climate change scenarios shows us the results, and we get a bandwidth of the simulation results, a possible bandwidth where the temperature course will go. Now we wanted to know, what does it say? Okay, it's getting more warm, but how warm is warm? And so we evaluated the data on the over temperature degree hours. That means we count every hour which is above 26 degrees during opening time. I think the building is used as a museum building. And if you look on the diagram on the left part, so we can see the historical comparison period, and there are almost only a few hours with over temperature degrees above 26 degrees Celsius. And if we look to the period of the near future, I use the laser pointer. So here's the near future. So we can see what we already experienced. It's getting warmer, and it's rising. The temperature are rising, and we experience here quite a lot over temperature degree hours. And the far future, the temperatures are even rising. So this is a result. So for decision makers, they have to think how to deal with this information in future days, and what does that mean for the visitors. Now we look to the relative humidity in the building, and so we see here three diagrams. Again, historical comparison period, near future and far future. and the thick horizontal lines. This is the mean value of the measured data. And we can see that the models are slightly higher in the mean value compared to the model mean, to the measured mean value, but there is almost no change for the near future and for the far future compared to the historical period. And this is quite interesting to see. So we see a temperature rise, but the relative humidity for this model, for this building, we cannot see that the relative humidity curves will change too much compared to the historical period. So we have now temperature and relative humidity, and with these both data, we can calculate the lifetime multiplier. And here in this lifetime multiplier, the relative humidity goes in, and also the temperature. And at the activation energy, this means this is a material constant to describe the sensitivity of the material in terms of chemical reactiveness. And here we see different materials, here silk and paper and wooden furniture. And these different materials are in the building. And we see here for silk, for the historical period, the lifetime multiplier is above 1, and the lifetime multiplier should be above 1. Otherwise, the chemical degradation will be increased. And what we can see here, it goes below 1. And this is not good. And so, yeah, this is some information for decision makers. Also, we can see on paper and wooden furniture that the lifetime multiplier decreases in the next decades. We come now to the second case study, the Depot Himberg in Austria. These are climate change projections from the Austrian institutions. And here we had the problem that we couldn't get a climate change scenario in hourly data. They have many climate change scenarios, but only with daily mean values. And so we have used a model developed in the project Climate for Culture. And this is an RCP 4.5 scenario. Here are the different scenarios are shown. And right now, as far as I understand, we are on the way between RCP 6 and RCP 8.5. So that means we are not able to reduce CO2 emission enough, and therefore we are on that way. We will see. To understand what will happen in a climate change scenario, RCP 4.5 is also good to use, so we can see what the future could bring to the depot. This is the depot, the ground floor of the second upper floor, the ground sketch, and yeah, it's up in that level about, yeah. And this is the WUFI Plus model where we implemented the building envelope. This is a calibration process. Here we see again the simulation results, the green lines compared to the measured values. And what we can see here, the relative humidity, it's very tightly controlled. So as they have a full HVAC system, and in winter time, yeah, they go down a little bit with relative humidity, but in a very tight, narrow corridor of 48 to 54%. This means plus minus 3 something, and this is measured data, so they have this constant climate. And also here on the temperature, you can see very constant climate. Yeah, only in winter times they go down to 18 degrees. In summertime, it's something about 20.5 degrees. And so we can see here the absolute humidity is a simulated one and the measured one, and where the simulation delivers very good results. So we can see here a dehumidification process, and here a humidification process, and the gray line is the outdoor absolute humidity. yeah, these are the results of the simulation. And here we see again on the left side at the historic comparison period, and the middle the near future, and the right the far future. And here the heating power is shown. Each bar stands for 1 year. And so we have some variation from year to year. So far, so good. And we see that some energy consumption, and we can observe for the near future and far future, so the heating demand will decrease. Okay, so that's so far so good. But what we also can see is here the cooling power will increase in terms of absolute numbers. So it's almost doubling. Yeah, more interesting here is to see the humidification and dehumidification process. Here is again the historic period, and we observe here in the simulation output that the humidification process or need for humidification will decrease, but dehumidification will increase. It's almost it's doubling. So yeah, it's interesting to see, and this is also for the decision maker to have to look to your HVAC system. Is this possible for the HVAC system to double the dehumidification process? So we investigated then. Yeah, here the lifetime multiplier, and we can see it's well above 1. And it doesn't change, and that's clear. It's fully controlled by HVAC, so there is no change in the indoor climate, and so the lifetime multiplier is the same. So we were interested how to save energy for this modern building, and so we assumed here a lower temperature, a new climate corridor, so to allow the indoor climate to cool down in wintertime down to 10 degrees Celsius. And we widened a little bit the relative humidity corridor to ±5. And very interesting to see is the lowering of heating demand. So this red line is the heating demand was the mean value before. With 18 to 20 degree indoor temperature. And here we see quite a drop on heating demand, and the heating demand is here also lowering. And the cooling demand is rising in terms of absolute numbers for the near and far future.
2 minutes, Stefan, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And here for the humidification and dehumidification process, we see that there is also a drop in humidification need. Yeah, it's only a 1/10 or something what was needed before, but the dehumidification process is still necessary, and it's doubling like we have seen before. And the lifetime multiplier is even higher than before, and that comes from the lower temperatures, because the lifetime multiplier rises when the temperature is lowered. As a conclusion, the ensemble simulation gives insight in possible benefits of indoor climate. During opening time, the over-degree hours increases for Charlottenhof. The lifetime multiplier decreases for some materials below 1. And for the Bochum, for the full HVAC with tight climate corridor, we're seeing that the lifetime multiplier stays above 1. That's good. Less heating and more cooling demand will be required in this scenario, and less humidifying and more dehumidifying, it's almost doubling, will be required. And the tight temperature range versus wider temperature range, we can observe that there are energy saving up to 50% are possible, and the need for humidifying drops to 1/10. And as a short outlook, I want to present the Natural History Museum Vienna. We are running right now climate change scenarios, also with the RCP 4.5 model. And we want to see, to investigate also the energy demand and humidifying and dehumidifying process. And as the second one, outlook, this is the Depot Wasserburg, also located in the south of Germany. We have calculated also energy demand compared to different climate corridors. And now we are measuring the energy performance of that building if it reaches the calculated energy level of a passive house depot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stefan. So thank you, Dr. Bilkemeyer. Lots of questions piling up in Slido for you. So a reminder to attendees to please put the @ symbol and the speaker's name at the beginning of your questions to help us organize these for the Q&A session after this group of speakers, and also to attendees to keep your cameras and microphones off. Thank you. So we'll see you in a few minutes, Stefan. Our next speaker is Dr. Christoph Siegert, Partner and Managing Director of ZRS Architects and Engineers in Berlin. The theme of Dr. Siegert's presentation is Resilient Indoor Climate Stabilization Using Earth Building Materials. So you are currently muted, Christoph. There you go. Go ahead and put your slides up.
Thank you, Dawn.
It seems to be thinking. There we go. All right, you're good to go, and I will give you a 2-minute warning.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. I will speak, thank you for the invitation. I will speak about the resilience of indoor climate stabilization using earth building materials. So we are not the specialists like Stefan about simulation of the indoor climate. We are specialists, architects and engineers to implement this in the building process to make the architecture and engineering design for this. I'm just coming from Uruk in Iraq. Yesterday I was there, and you see there a very, very, very old earthen building. It's the Anat Zikorat in Mesopotamia, Uruk, and 2200 BC. And we worked there, I had conservation works, and you see on the right picture the condition of the straw, which is in the earthen mortar. You see that's yellow and in a very good condition. So the specialist for organic material, which was with us in the team from the Deutsches Archäologisches Institut, was they was shocked how good the condition is, and they took samples and from grains and so on. So that means the earthen building products, because of their very special humidity behavior, are conserving organic materials, and then it's good for us as humans in a building, and it's good for the things that are in the museum. Short introduction: the earth building materials are the earth is a product of volcanic rocks and erosion products, and the clay minerals as a binder in these earths are very, very small. And so in 1 gram, you have up to 1000 square meters of inner surface, and this high inner surface, which is not baked together like by a brick, or not glued together by cement or something. This incredible inner surface with loaded mineral surfaces, so then these inner surfaces are able to absorb much more humidity as other building products. You see it in the right graph. So you see the blue line is gypsum plaster, the green line is not the right color, is cement plaster, the orange line is lime plaster, and you see the red line is much, much higher. And this is the moisture dynamic moisture buffering capacity by humidity change of 50 to 80% humidity. And you see the during the time of in hours, it's x, and the gram per square meter plaster layer, 1.5 centimeters thick. How much water can be absorbed by this change in humidity. And you see on the right end of this graph how the curve is going down also. So it's not only absorbing, it's also desorption. So the buffering effect is much, much higher. So 6 times against gypsum, 3.5 times against the lime plaster. We have in Germany codes for these products and for the application of earth and building products, and then we have classes for this buffering effect, and the best class in the wasserdampfsorption class 3 is minimum 5 times better than gypsum plus. And then if you order such a plaster with this WS3, then you are sure that you are 5 times better than gypsum plaster. There's another effect of this incredible high inner surface with the loading particles, loaded particles. They are a cleaning effect of different pollutions, especially by VOCs. There was different tests by the National Institute of Testing together with our office. It shows that the absorption of this pollution is in some pollutions 1 and some pollutions 5, 6, 8 times higher than by other building products. So it's buffering of humidity and cleaning of the indoor air effect. So what does it mean for the museums or archive buildings? They are the first buildings which has used this effect in the design. Like Stefan explained, there are few offices and institutes which are able to make this design, and if they calculate with this indoor climate effect of these person building products, like here in the archive of the Archaeological Park of Xanten, they built in a conventional envelope. They built 4 centimeter of earth plaster, and they reduce the building the climate unit down 20%, 25%, and this machine is running maximum by around 50%. So the effect is huge, especially for our archive buildings where the influence from outside is not so big, like by a museum with a lot of visitors. But also there are simulations. In Berlin, the Naturkunde Museum is one part of the Naturkunde Museum is already plastered with an earth plaster, and there are simulation for the next projects like the Gropiusbau in Berlin. This simulation was done by the Institut für Bauklimatik from the TU Dresden, and you see in the diagram the red and the dark line are lime plasters, and then the brownish ones, which has no zigzag, which is leveled, is the earth plaster. And this is, by the way, I heard from the guys from the Naturkunde Museum, very important for the animals and so on. which doesn't like the zigzag effect of the climate. They want to have these smooth waves. So as I told you, my specialty is that we design and calculate these envelopes of these products. And the products, the ocean building products, are available in Europe. They are especially available in Germany. There's growing up industry for this. And as the first speakers, Pill, Rasmussen, and Heidi, announced that we will not only build sustainable for the things in the museum, we want to be sustainable for the environment as well. And you can see that the CO2 impact of the earthen building product is much lower than gypsum plaster and lime plaster and cement plaster. So the lowest possible earth plaster is LPM moist. This is a not white product, and this is more than 10 times lower in the climate impact than a gypsum plaster or lime plaster or cement plaster. So as I announced before, we have DIN codes for these products and for the application of these products. These DIN codes will be available from spring 2026 in English also, and so they can apply it worldwide. In opposite to other countries, it's regarding these codes forbidden to mix in the poor earthen building material, to mix gypsum, cement, and lime or polymers or anything like that for so-called stabilization. Then we called it not anymore. If you stabilize it, then we call it not anymore earthen building products, because the behavior totally change if you mix cement and it's more a concrete like in the earthen building products. And it's, by the way, it's not functional as well. You see here that if you mix in the percentage, you see on the x-axis lime and cement and so on, it's the strength is lower than the original earthen building product, which is on the very left. So it's ineffective and it disturbs all the good behaviors of the earth. And you need to make it more stable, you need so much cement, then it's not effective. You would be better if you mix this cement with sand. And this reduces also the moisture buffering effect. You see here how it goes down by the different stabilizers. So please don't stabilize the earth. The earth is a perfect product. Don't need stabilizers. So what you can do with the earth, the simplest one is to bring on a on a conventional envelope from bricks of concrete and so on. You bring a plaster on it, and then you have enough for, let's say, a daily effect of moisture buffering or maximum half week. Same with the drywall panels, which you see on the middle picture, which are 2 cm thick. So then you buffer the daily climate changes. And for the longer periods, you need bigger earthen building products behind the plaster or the cladding, which could be from earth blocks or from burned earth. And the earthen building products are applied also by aesthetical reasons. You see here the Bergbau-Museum from Köln, which was the Museum of the Year in Germany, from Peter Zumthor designed. And the whole museum is plastered by a grayish earth plaster. And this was selected by the design of this plaster, and of course by the moisture buffering behavior. And you see on the right, it's also on staircases and so on, where the people are scratching on the wall. So these plasters are, the usability is full there. That's not that they are fragile and something like that. That's are good products anyway without stabilization. So the panels are used in drywalls very often in Germany instead of gypsum boards. And there are special systems which integrated heating and cooling systems. You see on the red picture, these red left picture, these red pipes which you can connect with these boards. And you see in the middle and right pictures this board where you can implement the pipes, and then you plaster both of these systems. These boards you can use for cooling and for heating. And we implement these boards by office buildings like here. And you can be sure these products are tested regarding the German regulations. So this sandbag is pushed on these boards for testing, that nobody will go through such a partition wall if there is some difficult situation, and even hanging loads should be tested and so on. So these are safe products, and you can be sure that you apply it, you're on the safe side. We often build wooden structures and fill the wooden structures in the outer walls with sustainable insulation materials, and the inner walls for buffering the climate with earth blocks, as you can see here in this floor from a school. And that means these walls are separated in function. The outer wall is for buffering the temperature from outside to the inside, and the heavy walls, heavy partition walls inside are there for buffering the temperature inside and the humidity inside. There's another earthen technique which is called rammed earth. This is a very expensive technique, but very nice. So here you can see a storage building from the company Veleda. Maybe you know it from your cosmetic you use. And we did there the material design from the ground, directly from the ground of this building. We did the formulation of this rammed earth material, and then the structural design for this storage building, and the indoor climate simulation was done by Transolar. And this building needs nor in the year heating or cooling. There is only ventilating that in this high building there's exchange of the air from down to up. And yeah, you can implement this rammed earth wall insides for the buffering of the climate. Here on the right picture, it's a museum in Belgium where we did it. This is very special design. By the rammed earth wall, there's a special effect that also the noises are going down because of this porosity of the surface. The women on the desk here in this museum on the right, they always saying that even if there are 3 school classes, that's a quiet environment.
2 minutes, Christoph, 2 minutes.
Okay, fine. Perfect. So a cheaper way for solid earth walls is the earth block walling. Like here, it's allowed in Germany for up to 4 stories now since 23, and often combined with solid wood ceilings like you see in the middle picture. And the strength of these earth blocks is as high as from fired brick. You can see it here in the shear strength testing, that it's crashed in the same way like the bricks. If you are lucky, then you have an earth building existing, and then you can change it. You did it here in the Strategiefonds Museum in the UAE with let's say modern design to a new look, and it's the indoor climate is incredible. And another thing is the inside insulation with earthen building products. Here's a very old residential building, and you can clad inside of this conventional brick walling. You glue with earthen mortar special insulation materials like wood fibers or foamed minerals, and you glue it inside on the wall, and this special moisture behavior of these earth building products and these insulation products are can buffer the condensation and let the wall healthy. So this is after plastering with earth plaster, and the people are lucky the building is healthy and wants a lot of prizes. Awards, sorry, a lot of awards. So as you can see, the earthen building products are in Germany well known, and international also. It's not a new thing. It's a very old technique, and all the people which are living or using earthen building and the earthen building products, they are happy with the indoor climate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christoph. And a reminder to attendees to put all your speaker questions into Slido. They are piling up for you as well. Our next Q&A session will happen after the upcoming dual presentation. So thank you again. And we're going to just keep jumping right along to the next one. Our next presentation will feature Dr. Morten Reil Svendsen, Associate Professor of the Institute of Conservation at the Royal Danish Academy in Copenhagen, Denmark, and Simon Lambert, Manager of the Preventive Conservation Division at the Canadian Conservation Institute in Ottawa, Canada. Each speaker will give a short presentation, followed by a dialogue between the speakers. Dr. Reil Svendsen will present on low-energy museum storage, the Danish experience, and Mr. Lambert will talk about new climate guidelines and tools from the Canadian Conservation Institute. Morten, if you want to put on, and I will go ahead and put your slides up, and I will let you know when we see them. I'm seeing many, many slides.
Yes. Is it full screen now?
Not yet. Right now. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Thank you. So thank you for the invitation to speak here. And I'm really happy to follow the previous very interesting talks. They're right down my alley. So I will briefly present the experience we had here in Denmark with regard to low energy solutions for storage. So over the last 20 years or so, more than 10 modern storage buildings has been built, several of them as shared facilities and as buildings that contrast sharply with traditional HVAC operated buildings. The concept is characterized by well, in most cases by passive temperature regulation, by a high thermal insulation combined with a large thermal mass inside the building, very low exchange, and when necessary, mechanical dehumidification. And this gives, in a northern temperate climate, such as in Scandinavia, it will allow a cool indoor environment where the annual average temperature is close to what it is outside. These buildings perform quite well on all preservation metrics, and they do this for a tiny energy consumption. I must, however, stress that not two buildings are identical. The so-called Danish model is not a single design, but it's rather a family of buildings which are based on a shared principle. So these buildings are indeed sustainable with regard to the operation. They run at a very low energy consumption. But the question is, how is the full picture? What is the full climatic impact of such a modern building? We have been looking into this by analyzing 6 modern buildings, all built within about the last decade. And it is so that a typical modern museum building is, well, it's mainly concrete, steel, and mineral wool. Even so, these buildings that we investigated are all fulfilling the Danish building code requirements, even as they are being increasingly tightened year after year. However, one crucial point is is how much shelvings weigh into the life cycle calculations, really depending on if they are made from new or from recycled metal. In this survey, we took example in one of the buildings, the storage building in Ugerløse in Zealand, Denmark, and we calculated how the life cycle impact of this same building would behave if it was made in different materials. And by this, we showed how the CO2 footprint could be actually half by using wood and other biomaterials as part of the construction and as a substitute to the traditional materials, especially steel and concrete. But in any case, for this type of building, the CO2 footprint of the building itself largely overshadow the operational CO2 during its entire lifetime, which, by the way, is an open question. What is the lifetime of such a building? Now, in the Danish building code, we use 50 years as a benchmark, even though we expect that high quality buildings should last much longer. But no matter what, I must stress that the greenest buildings are those that we don't build. If we really want to lower the climate impact from museum buildings, we must concentrate much more on reusing the existing building stock, which is a subject that my colleagues and I are now focusing more and more towards. Before I conclude, I will just draw your attention to a couple of publications. This report, which we published earlier this year, it's kind of a how-to guide on the modern low-energy buildings, and it will very soon be out in an English version, hopefully before New Year. And then also, I will draw your attention to this survey, which collated a lot of empirical data on both new and converted storage buildings, which we have collected over the last 20 years. With this, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Martin. And if you just, there you go. Simon, if you want to jump in there with your slides, and you are muted, Simon.
Yes. Hi.
There you
Can
go.
you see me? Or can you see the
Absolutely, it's
presentation?
perfect.
Great. All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to join you all today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. CCI is an agency of the Department of Canadian Heritage, and we offer services, training, and research to over 2,000 heritage institutions of all types and sizes across Canada. For decades, many institutions have relied on 20 degrees C and 50% RH as default targets, often as a marker of professionalism. But most objects do not require those conditions, and maintaining them comes with significant energy and carbon implications. Our risk assessment projects show that RH fluctuation is often a minor risk compared to fire, water, and other hazards. There's also a social impact. Overly strict climate requirements have sometimes created barriers to loans, access, or repatriation, which contradicts Canada's commitments to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. In Canada, the climate control challenge is amplified. We have larger seasonal swings, high heating loads, diverse energy costs and carbon intensity across provinces and territories. But like elsewhere, we have aging infrastructure, and we have a heritage sector with a majority of small institutions looking for practical, affordable solutions. During our consultations, institutions told us they wanted clear, evidence-based guidance. What can we safely relax? What are the risks? And how do we explain these decisions to leadership? To guide this shift, we developed a working definition of sustainable climate control that balances environmental impact, social responsibility, financial viability, and preservation needs of collections. Not all institutions or communities will weigh these equally. The key is that climate control becomes context-specific, not a universal rule. ASHRAE control types A through D are performance bands, not hierarchies. Type D, or simply avoiding damp, is already an effective, sustainable baseline for many buildings. Tighter control can be added when justified by collection needs and building capacity. This reframing is essential for low energy practice. It tells institutions that broader ranges can be legitimate, safe, and perhaps even preferable. To help museums apply these ideas in real context, we've released updated climate guidelines, which includes various detailed sections along with two practical tools, the Climate Control Decision Tool and ClimateSpec. The Climate Control Decision Tool is a short decision tree with a series of yes/no questions that consider collection sensitivity based in part on material properties and climate history, Indigenous belongings, loan requirements, and other operational constraints to provide general advice. In this demo, we selected yes to every question to show you how it works. Now let's look at how ClimateSpec works in action. To use ClimateSpec, you will choose from three drop-down menus: type of object or collection, subtypes related to mechanical sensitivity to fluctuations in climate, and subtypes related to chemical decay or other deterioration issues. If, for example, you're considering a small museum with a mixed historical collection, in ClimateSpec you can select Mixed Collection History. In the second dropdown, we'll select 2, the climate history of the collection is unknown. You can click on Show Mechanical Examples for more detail about what this subtype means. And in the third dropdown, we'll select 2, acidic materials. Again, you can click on Show Chemical Examples to help decide if this selection best fits the collection you're considering. When all 3 selections have been made and you click Submit, ClimateSpec will give you recommendations to consider on the following topics: recommended ASHRAE types of control with which sometimes includes helpful sections about hazardous materials. You can see that there are hyperlinks to resources to further explore topics, and these links are found throughout the recommendations. Also, sustainability and carbon footprint issues, danger boundaries of temperature and RH, baselines of temperature and RH, sensitivity of objects to fluctuations, response time of object to fluctuations, sensitivity of objects to pollutants and recommended control, and approximate lifetime of organic materials at room conditions. This will give you an estimate of years and describe the predicted state of the materials at that point. You can then use the lifetime calculator below to input specific conditions in your facility for the organic materials in the category you originally selected above to refine the estimate of remaining lifetime, as your facility's conditions may be different. Lifetime is defined as the time, usually in years, for an object to deteriorate to a state at which it no longer has value or utility to the institution. So your institution will have to make a judgment on what end of lifetime looks like in your context. And finally, there is a mold calculator for relative humidities above 65%. You'll see as you try different inputs, climate spec recommendations will vary. These recommendations are all evidence-based, so you'll find a full list of references at the bottom with in-text citations in the recommendations themselves. To support this shift with real data, we're launching a multi-year case study with a partner museum. The goal is to identify the actual, I can say we've signed the agreement today, so it's the Canadian Museum of History. The goal is to quantify the actual energy, carbon, and final impacts of broadening RH and temperature set points in a Canadian climate. We will monitor RH and energy use for 13 months under current conditions, implement broader set points aligned with ASHRAE types of control, then monitor the same space for another 12 months. Track both whole building and component level loads, so heating, cooling, humidification, and dehumidification. Analyze the energy performance, costs, and carbon impacts. This project will address a major evidence gap, which is that how much energy can Canadian museums truly save by updating their set points and allowing broader ranges for temperature and RH. The findings will directly support our dissemination strategy, provide case study evidence, improving our tools, and creating a methodology that other institutions can apply. With updated guidance, tools like Climate Spec, and eventually real Canadian case study data, museums can make informed, sustainable, socially responsible decisions while protecting collections and reducing carbon footprint. Thank you. I look forward to the discussion.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Simon. So the one thing I just want to point out here is it's having these tools and having publications come out is so incredibly important, since a lot of the information that's come out is so old or is very temperate climate based. And I think this is particularly important. One thing that I think was interesting, and I really kind of want you to be able to ask each other questions, but I kind of want to get us started with, you were talking, Simon, about the life cycle of collections, but I'm also interested about sort of the life cycle and the lifetime of buildings, right? Looking at older buildings, maybe retrofitting buildings, and then modeling out into what we're doing and what we're going to be needing to do in the future. Can you talk a little bit about that idea of the lifetime of buildings or the life cycle of buildings? And then honestly, ask each other questions. Go for it. We've got another 15 minutes maybe to chat. So,
well, actually, I was interested in asking Morten how that concept from Denmark could be applied to our climate, because it's a sort of northern temperate climate. In Denmark, we have a more extreme climate, but yeah, but I don't have any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. You could, of course, put this type of building anywhere in the world. But what will happen is that the average temperature indoor will be the average temperature of the outdoor. So if you put it in Singapore, it will be quite warm year round. Having said that, there are many examples of buildings similar to these in other countries than Denmark, I mean, in Central Europe and other places in Scandinavia and UK and so on, even in Romania. We have yet to see this type of building on other continents. We have modeled for publications. Actually, we placed a building in Washington, D.C. At a previous conference at Smithsonian. And I have also once modeled this building for Canberra, Australia. And so there are many places on the earth where it will fit, but the limitation is, of course, the outdoor climate. If it's placed in warmer climates, well, then you need to allocate some energy for cooling if you wish to have a longer lifetime for materials. Yeah,
that's interesting, and also it's making me think that if it's more in line with what's outdoors, then that's going to put pressure on people to really argue, well, can collections withstand this? And having an evidence base that can justify that collections can withstand more than what they traditionally have been said to be able to withstand, then that will be important, because there may be pushback and saying, well, no, we can't, because that won't be good for the collection. But if we have that evidence base that supports, a more wider ranges, then
sure,
that'll be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the first examples of these buildings were made about 25 years ago, pushing 30 years ago. And at that time, the standard was, constant temperature. And so that was the first thing that we had to deal with, to having the museums to accept a temperature that varied over the year to, a cool winter temperature and a bit warmer summer temperature. So we had this discussion here for sure. And then with regard to relative humidity, well, most of the buildings that I'm aware of here in Denmark, they are running in a band between 40 and 60% RH. But in other climates, you may have to help a little with some mechanical humidity control if you want to stay within these boundaries. But still, I mean, the key feature of these buildings is that you don't heat or cool, and that's the main reason why they are so energy efficient. As soon as you start to either heat or cool, you're getting closer to a normal HVAC controlled building.
For us, yeah, that's great. For us, the looking at the past climate and the climate history is really important, and
yeah,
it's sort of a key part of risk management. And our guidelines emphasize the concept of proof fluctuations, which refers to the idea that if a collection has endured a certain pattern of RH and temperature swings over the past, any damage to them, mechanical damage, has already occurred, and so they can effectively be proven safe.
right.
It's a bit different for chemical, obviously, because then chemical degradation is a bit different phenomenon, but still, just by using the ClimaSpec, you can run different scenarios and see how much lifetime past conditions have already made you lose in terms of lifetime for those chemically sensitive objects. And so maybe you might not need, maybe providing more than what the collection needs is more carbon intensive than it needs to be and more energy intensive than it needs to be, because you've already lost a lot of that lifetime. And so,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. yeah. And I guess so in Canada there will be a lot of cold areas where you for nothing gets a long lifetime of your
Yes.
materials. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, we're advising on projects up north in Nunavut, and we're trying to push the designers to look at ways to use the exterior, the naturally cool conditions in order to prolong the collection lifetime. So that's a very interesting project that we're working on right now, and
All right, yeah,
yeah.
I was thinking something about these guidelines that CCI published, and I totally agree with your slide. You said something like one size don't fit all, or something like that. There's not one guideline fits everything. One criticism I heard on guidelines in general is that they are much of it is based on lab experiments rather than empirical data. But then I was very happy to hear that you mentioned that it's very reference based, your guidelines. But what are your thoughts on this balance between say results from artificial aging versus what we observe in real museum environments?
Well, I'll say right off the bat, I'm not a conservation scientist, so I don't know. Although, yeah, so the real mind behind this tool is Stefan Michalski, and so I don't know exactly what part of is empirical or lab-based,
fair enough.
but I know that there's a complete literature review was done for this tool. So there's over 140, I think, references. And it also identifies areas where no research exists on certain materials, which is interesting. So this can evolve over time. Yeah. But I think we often hear this criticism that there's not absolute certainty about things, and there's conflicting opinions and all of that, but ultimately we're responsible for supporting a community of heritage institutions, over 2,000, I said in the beginning. Most of them are institutions with no access to external expertise, very limited resources. So we have to think about them. And so we what the alternative is them having access to information that's maybe outdated or conflicting, or using AI to get access to automated information that maybe hasn't gone through the vetting process of looking at this, the most up-to-date research. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is something you said a little bit earlier. I think you both touched on. It's not just about preserving the collections, but it's about preserving our ability to preserve the collections, right? It's giving people the tools that they need, making something fiscally reasonable, something that's doable, and doing the best you can to preserve a collection, as opposed to doing nothing, right? So it prolongs our ability to keep caring for these collections when we're doing this in a responsible way. We have just 2 minutes left on this chat, but I'm totally going to jump on the AI thing you just said. AI and modeling. Yeah, I know the eyes got really, really big.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
good
see what it
heavens.
says.
What is that? Hold on a second. That's my phone going off. I'm so sorry. Maybe it didn't want me to talk about AI. The AI gods are angry. But have you seen AI used in any of these kinds of tools or any of these studies? And obviously there's an issue of it making up information, but what have you seen so far where people kind of dipping their toe into it? In 2 minutes.
I mean, there's definitely a potential for us to use AI going forward, but I think we need to feed it things that it will go and crawl and get stuff from you don't know where. So the reliability and the authoritativeness of the information is a bit questionable, especially when people are being asked to justify their recommendations and to senior management. I think it needs that. Well, what we've found through our surveys and through our studies is that users of these resources really want something that's backed by an institutional reputation. So yeah, so I think this offers that.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually I'm using machine learning to predict how these buildings will behave in a future climate. So that's a field that it is expanding all the time, and also I mean, in line with some of the earlier talks here today. So that's a tool that we use. Yeah.
And that's a nice little push towards the final day of this conference. We'll have some speakers discussing AI. Just wanted to tie the days together. So this is terrific. Please stay on camera because we're going to do Q&A session. Christoph and Stefan, if you please turn on your cameras and your microphones. And I'm going to dig into this enormous pile of questions that we have from Slido for everyone. And Christoph and Stefan. There you go. Okay. Let's see. I think I'm going to start with Stefan. We have two questions that are a little bit related, I think. One here is what is the benefit of using simulations on existing buildings where measurements may already be available? And then the second one, which I think is kind of connected, is how can hygrothermal simulations and risk assessments strengthen the resilience of historic buildings and collections against future climate extremes?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. So in a building simulation, you can observe when the model fits very well. So it is good when you have some measured data to compare your model answer to measured data. But then if you have a calibrated model, you can change things in the model before you change things in reality. So if you have to adapt your building because of, I don't know, something, you want something to change. For example, you want to do something on your windows because there is too much light and whatever, or too much energy losses. And so you can simulate virtually, and then you see what you get out of this planned measure. And then you have a qualified answer for decision making. Or if you plan to renew your HVAC system, or if you plan to go down with the temperature level, then you will see how much energy you will save, what happens to the humidity, do you need then dehumidifying devices, and so on. This is where you can benefit from simulation.
Perfect. Thank you.
And this is the same for the adoption of climate change questions. So in the first example on Charlottenhof, this was the questions not only on Charlottenhof, but also on the garden, on the park. What will happen in climate change? And this is an important question to know. Yes, everybody can think about it. If it gets warmer, then inside the building it will get more warm. But so you have some numbers. You can say, okay, with a model you get some numbers, and this is important for decision making because it's evidence-based. So when you get a more warm outside climate, then you can say, okay, we will have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 degrees more heat inside, and then you can think about what to do. And if you come to a conclusion, yes, let's try something with HVAC or some passive measures, like Christoph Ziegert said, maybe a plaster with clay will help, whatever. Then you can virtually test in a model, and this is the main aim of this tool.
Thank you. Christoph, I'm going to go to you next. So again, two questions that are kind of related. One is what measures are taken or need to be taken to think about pests or other contaminants when you're using earth building materials? And connected to that, of course, most building materials have to abide by regional building codes, right? And sort of if you can talk a little bit about that.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. So the last thing first. There are more and more countries which adapt our person building codes to their country, or they refer to our ones. So, for instance, the Swedish code now for earth blasters, there, Belgium one, French take over our earth building code for earth blocks and so on. So more and more, and there's a good collaboration and exchange. It's perfect, but you're right. It's not a European code. It's or something like that. So the normal practice is if in your country there's no code for a field of work, then you can try to refer to the code in another countries, and the German as bad world champion of codes, it's welcome to that you refer on the German codes, and as I announced before, with the translation of the German codes, which are available in spring 26, then it's possible for everyone in the world. Second question was pest or something like that. So
Yeah, pests and contaminants.
Yeah. So no concern. There's if you use too much straw in the earth plaster, then it's could be difficult in countries where you have termites. So then it's interesting for them to eat it, but then you have to use a lot of straw for this hazard. Otherwise, it's not interesting for them. That's boring them to eat their a little straw and then 2 meters far away. So it's not interesting for them. Another thing is that the climate buffering behavior is helping against mold. So that's so the let's say the bacterial situation is much better as on other surfaces, which changes in the surface or close to the surface humidity much more. So it's normally a dry and a dry surface which you cannot reach a molted person building surface. Then you have to use. Then you need a massive leak of heating or a massive influence of infiltrated water also and so on. So the climate is so stable that you have a natural protection against mold.
Continuing to building materials, kind of. Morten, are you using other sustainability metrics aside from carbon footprint in your decision-making process for construction materials?
Well, I mean, we are struggling with building codes in Denmark because we have been looking into, for example, using unburned clay or or similar as in Germany, but the builders simply won't they won't risk using it as long as there are no Danish standards for this. So I mean, I hope that we will get that, because one metric could be, you know, to use local materials. But I mean, then there's the whole energy issue. Most of the Danish stores are running on electricity. A few are using natural gas. So there are different carbon footprints on different energy sources. But there's also national intentions on having, you know, carbon-free energy in, say, 20 or 30 years, using solar power or wind turbines and so on. So this is an issue that is changing almost day by day. But I mean, it's for sure it's an issue for the museums, because they have to pay the energy bill. I mean, especially the use of natural gas has been a big issue here for the last few years. Yeah.
Simon, is there a plan to publish the method of the planned case studies to repeat them on a larger scale or in diverse locations?
Yes, absolutely. This is just like the first step. We wanted to just have this case study as a first exploration into this, and we do want to publish it for sure, and then see where we can go from there, because I think the first case study is really going to be looking at staying within an ASHRAE A type of control. How can we use the maximum allowable range within that type of control, and what then is the impact on energy savings? But there's various other things that we could also look at in other future investigations, like adjusting the set points and you know, lowering to a different type of control, or I shouldn't say lower, so opt for a different type of control. But yeah, the idea is to have something that other institutions can then replicate.
Terrific. And I see that somebody in the questions has put in a question that I don't have to ask it again, so because somebody else has written it. Stefan, how do you see AI supporting the management and resilience of building environments? How do you see AI coming into modeling and machine learning?
Yeah, sure, it's coming. So like Martin said already, he uses for modeling or to train the machine learning the models, and yeah, it will come. Many people are working on it, and I'm also right now working on machine learning. For example, we want to train a machine learning system to recognize relative humidity and temperature fluctuations, because this is quite difficult. And so we are doing that right now. And to train a machine learning system, you need experts who say this is good and this is bad. And you need a lot of examples to get a good training and so on. And yeah, many people are working on it, and so we do.
And Christoph, before we do the breakout rooms, I have one more question here for Christoph. It's another two-part question, because I like two-part questions. So based on Stefan's presentation, there's an expectation that climate will become more humid. Would there be a risk that higher humidity reduces the adhesion of earth-based building materials? And connected to that, how do you quantify those materials' humidity buffering? The second part of it is coming from a paper conservator who really wants to understand the shifts in humidity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you check it. There's the test in our codes described. You have a plate, which is closed on 5 sides, and only the surface is available for the humidity, and there's the plaster in it. So only the humidity comes from above. Then you do it in the climate chamber. Bring it in the average level by a humidity of 50% and by 23 degrees, and then you change the climate to 80%, and then you measure the difference in weight per minute or hour. And then you get such a curve, and we call it dynamic water absorption, which is more relevant for the climate buffering as the absolute moisture content after a time of 10 days, which is the equal to each climate. So the speed of the reaction combined with the total buffering capacity is the most important one. Yeah. Second question, a more humid climate. As I was in Bangladesh for a school building made of earth, the rural people told me that they can storage the grains only in earthen building because they get mold in concrete buildings. So the tolerance is better even in higher humidity climates. And at the end, I will call you a little real joke. I was with earth builders in the restaurant after a lecture, and then the guy from the restaurant was asking us, what peoples are you? And I say, earth builders. And he said, hey, that's fine. We make it all. Yet now with earth. And there you apply what you're doing. Yeah, we are old-timer club, and we applied this earth plaster in our garage. There's no corrosion on our cars. So somebody love it in the museum, somebody in the living room, somebody in the garage. So it's up to you, but it works.
Any sort of innovation, the first thing people do is use it to protect their cars.
Yes.
This is wonderful. Okay, we're going to wrap up this Q&A right now, and we're going to start. I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank all the speakers that we've had all day. We're going to begin the Meet the Speaker sessions now. I'm hoping that most, if not all, of the speakers from today will be able to be in breakout rooms. But for everyone who asked questions and didn't have an opportunity to get their questions asked, your speakers might be in the breakout rooms. So you can choose among different breakout room options that will be on your screen, and you can spend the whole time in one breakout room, or you can move between rooms, whatever you want to do. For accessing the breakout rooms, please wait until the conference host has enabled the breakout rooms. You will see a list of rooms in your meeting controls at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Direct your pointer to the number to the right of the breakout room you wish to join and click Join. Please note that there are a limited number of participants per breakout room, so if you're not able to join initially, you may want to wait a couple minutes or join another breakout room and come back to the first one. If you do not choose a breakout room, you will remain in this main conference room by default. If you have problems joining a breakout room, please use the Zoom chat or direct message the technical support Prins Media. The breakout rooms will last for another 25 minutes, and then you will be directed back here to the main room for today's closing announcements. So let's go ahead and look at breakout rooms, and we'll see you all back here at 25 minutes after. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. On behalf of the organizing committee and organizers, if you want to turn your cameras on just so people can see you, I want to thank you all for joining us for this first day of Focus on Conservation's online conference 2025, Routes to Resilience. Thank you to all of today's presenters and to all of you for your active participation. We hope that the lively conversations in today's breakout rooms continue throughout this conference. And thank you again to our colleagues at Prins Media for keeping everything running so smoothly today. We have a wonderful roster of speakers lined up all week, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And this is a reminder that tomorrow's sessions begin at 1400 UTC. So make those conversions however you need to. Terrific. Thank you all again, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Bye.